Chapter 36. Three Roads to War. Year 299 AC/8 ABY. Old Town, The Reach. Luke stood in the Hightower's courtyard as dawn painted the sky in shades of copper and rose. Servants loaded the last of their supplies into Lord Leighton's elaborate carriage with books wrapped in oilcloth, the dragonglass samples, and other supplies, though he decided to keep the holocron hidden with him. Amidala prowled the courtyard's edge, her massive paws leaving prints in the morning dew. The white direwolf's amber eyes tracked every servant, every movement, but her attention kept pulling back to Luke. She's worse than R2 when I'd leave him behind for missions, Luke thought, recognizing the telltale signs. The way her breathing quickened whenever distance grew between them, how her tail drooped despite Ghost's playful nips at her haunches. When Amidala padded close enough, her wet nose brushing his palm, Luke crouched and worked his fingers through the thick fur behind her ears. The direwolf's whole body seemed to exhale, tension bleeding out as she leaned her considerable weight against his leg. Her contentment rippled through the force like warm honey. "You're coming with us?" he murmured, finding that spot at the base of her skull that made her back leg twitch. "No need to worry." Ghost abandoned his game to investigate, jealously shoving his head under Luke's other hand. The younger wolf's red eyes held none of his mother's anxiety, just pure demand for equal attention. John emerged from the inn, making Ghost run at him, with Sam trailing behind him with an armload of volumes that threatened to spill with each step. The young Tarley's face glowed with exhaustion and excitement in equal measure. Days in the archives had transformed him from a nervous recruit into something approaching a scholar, though his Night's Watch blacks still hung awkwardly on his soft frame. "Master Luke." Marwyn's gravelly voice cut through the morning bustle. The Archmaester approached with purpose, his rod and mask chain catching the early light. "A word before you depart." Luke sensed the urgency beneath Marwyn's calm exterior. The force whispered of desperate hope mixed with professional jealousy. "Of course, Archmaester." Marwyn glanced at the servants, then lowered his voice. "In the few days you have been here, you've shown me more about the nature of reality than decades studying what the Citadel calls the higher mysteries." His weathered hands clenched. "The Maesters hoard knowledge like dragons hoard gold. They decide what the realm should know, what truths are too dangerous for common minds. Knowledge without wisdom can be dangerous," Luke said carefully. "So can ignorance." Marwyn's eyes blazed with conviction. "You speak of other worlds, of a power that connects all living things. The Citadel would lock such knowledge in their deepest vaults, accessible only to those they deem worthy. But if this threat from the north is real—" "It is," John interrupted, approaching with Sam. Ghost padded silently beside him, the direwolf's red eyes fixed on Marwyn. Marwyn nodded slowly. "Then we need every advantage, every scrap of understanding." He turned back to Luke. "Take me with you. Let me learn about this force, about the worlds beyond our own. I've spent my life seeking truth in dusty tomes and glass candles. You offer truth itself." Before Luke could respond, footsteps echoed on cobblestones. All Eras appeared, bow slung across her back, dressed for travel rather than study. Luke felt her determination through the force, bright and sharp as a blade. "If Marwyn goes, I go as well," she announced. "The Citadel will never chain a woman, so I've chained myself pretending to be what I'm not. You knew immediately what I was, Master Luke. Your force sees through deceptions. And I can provide, let's say, political help." "All Eras speaks 6 languages fluently," Marwyn added quickly. "She's the best archer in Old Town, and her mind is sharper than most maesters twice her age." Luke's eyes narrowed, studying the woman who called herself All Eras. "Political help is valuable," he said slowly. "But if we're to travel together, we should know who we're traveling with. Like your real name." A smile curved her lips, though not defensive, but almost playful. She shifted her weight, bow creaking against her shoulder. "Sarella Sand." An accent emerged now, no longer hidden beneath Old Town's educated tones. Luke glanced at John, whose face remained blank. No flicker of recognition crossed his features, but surprised she was a bastard too. Amidala yawned, showing rows of sharp teeth, equally unimpressed by her name. "Sand?" Sam breathed, clutching his books tighter. "You're just one of many bastards from Dorne." Sarella cut him off, though not unkindly. "One that has friends in high places." She met Luke's gaze directly. The force sang truth in her words. Luke felt the genuine hunger for understanding that drove her, the frustration of brilliant minds confined by arbitrary rules. He'd known that feeling once, trapped on a moisture farm while the galaxy spun beyond his reach. And Sam should come too, John said, surprising everyone. He knows more about the Long Night than anyone we've met. He reads High Valyrian, the Old Tongue, even some Githzerai. More importantly, John glanced at his new friend. He's on a mission from Maester Aemon. The same mission we're on. Sam's round face flushed. Lord Commander Mormont sent me to research the others, the last hero, anything that might help the Watch. He clutched his books tighter. Everything I've found points to the same conclusion. The Long Night is coming again. Master Luke, Sam ventured, his voice barely above a whisper. When you activated that glass candle, when you showed us the holocron, I felt something, like the world became larger and smaller at the same time. Like I could almost touch something I've been reaching for my whole life. The Force, Luke said simply. You have a connection to it, Sam. Weak, but present. Sam's eyes widened. Is that why I remember everything I read? Why I sometimes know things before I learn them? Possibly. Luke considered the three before him. Each represented a risk as more people who knew their secrets, more variables in an already complex situation. But they were in too deep already. What you learn will challenge everything you believe. Your understanding of the world, of reality itself, will shatter. It already has, Marwyn said firmly. The moment you made that picture float in Lord Hightower's solar, my worldview crumbled. I prefer truth to comfortable lies. As do I, all eras added. The Citadel teaches that magic died with the last dragon. Yet here you stand, wielding power that makes their deepest mysteries look like parlor tricks. Luke looked to John, who gave a subtle nod. The boy had grown in their time together, learning to trust his instincts. If John believed these three could help, very well, Luke decided. You may accompany us to Highgarden. But understand, this is not merely academic curiosity you're indulging. We face a real threat, an ancient enemy that commands forces you can barely imagine. What you learn may help save this world, or it may doom you. I'm already doomed if I return to Castle Black without help, Sam said with unexpected steel in his voice. At least this doom has purpose. Marwyn produced a leather-wrapped journal from his robes, handling it with unusual care. Lord Leighton asked me to give you this. For Lady Olenna, though he said only Lord Snow is permitted hold on to it and if he wants to, can read it. John accepted the journal, and Luke felt the force pulse around it. Something in those pages called to the boy, and John's fingers tightened on the leather, his jaw clenching as he resisted the urge to open it immediately. He said it would help in your negotiations, Marwyn continued. Lord Leighton believes Lady Olenna will find its contents illuminating. John tucked the journal into his pack with deliberate care. If it's meant for Lady Olenna, then she'll receive it unopened. Lord Hightower trusted me with this. I won't betray that trust. Marwyn's bushy eyebrows rose. Most young lords would tear it open the moment they were out of sight. I'm not most young lords, John said quietly. Then, with subtle emphasis that Luke caught, I am a Stark. The way he said it, not defiant, not proud, but as simple fact, told Luke everything. John had made his choice. Whatever his blood, whatever his true name, he would face the world as Ned Stark's son. The Force hummed approval around him. We should go, Jory called from the carriage. Lord Leighton's men grow restless. As they loaded into the carriage, Luke noticed how John kept touching his pack where the journal rested. The boy's curiosity burned bright in the Force, but his honor burned brighter. It was, Luke reflected, very like his uncle, or father, depending on how one counted such things. The carriage lurched into motion, wheels clattering on cobblestones. Through the window, Luke watched the Citadel recede, that great bastion of knowledge that hoarded its treasures so carefully. Luke caught Phalia's voice rising, her words tumbling over each other like water over stones. Oh, it's wonderful having another woman along, and another bastard too. I am sure we have much to speak about, don't we? Sorella's laugh came low and rich, carrying that particular note of someone who just discovered something amusing. Another bastard? Her voice sharpened with interest. How many of us has Master Luke collected? Exactly? Well, there's John. Phalia started counting on her fingers, the gesture visible through Luke's peripheral vision. And now you and me, of course. 3 bastards in one carriage, Sorella mused, and Luke could hear the smile in her voice. Either Master Luke has peculiar taste in traveling companions, or the gods have a sense of humor. Maybe both, John said quietly from his corner. not looking up from the window. Phalia giggled, and the sound was so unexpected after their tense departure that even Jory glanced back from his position beside the driver. Father always said bastards are made for each other. We know what it's like to fight for everything. Your father sounds enlightened. Sorella's tone carried layers Luke couldn't quite parse. Most lords prefer their bastards invisible. Oh, he hated me, Phalia said cheerfully, as if discussing the weather. But he was right about that much. These three young people, each carrying the weight of their birth like armor and wound both, had found themselves thrown together by chance. Or perhaps not chance at all. Master Luke does seem to have a talent for finding us, Sorella observed, her dark eyes finding his. One might wonder if it's intentional. Master Luke, Sam asked hesitantly as Old Town's walls passed by. Do you truly believe we can stop the long night? Luke thought of Yoda's warning, of Brandon Stark's incomplete message, of the enemy that commanded ice and shadow. He thought of the children he'd trained at Winterfell, each burning with potential. He thought of Jon beside him, wrestling with destiny and identity in equal measure. I believe we have to try, Luke said finally. The Force brought me here for a reason. Destiny? Sorella murmured, her voice carrying a note of wonder. Or chance, Marwyn countered. Though his tone suggested he didn't believe it, Jon said nothing, but his hand found the journal again, fingers tracing its edges through the fabric of his pack. Whatever secrets it held, whatever Lord Leighton knew or suspected, would wait. Honor demanded it. White Harbor, the north. Ned studied the map spread across Lord Wyman's solar, tracing the route from White Harbor to King's Landing with one finger while his other hand held a goblet of Arbor gold. The wine tasted of summer peaches and distant warmth, a stark contrast to the chill seeping through the stone walls. 2 days in White Harbor had given him time to think, to plan, but not enough to quiet the unease coiling in his gut. Your granddaughters have been most gracious hosts, Ned said, glancing up at Wyman. The massive lord sat across from him, his bulk making the reinforced chair creak with each subtle movement. Princess Daenerys speaks highly of them. Wyman's face softened, flesh folding into genuine pleasure. Winifred and Willa are the pride of House Manderly. They've taken to the Targaryen girl like sisters. The word triggered memory of last night's private dinner in the Merman's court. Ned had watched Daenerys seated between the Manderly girls, her silver hair catching candlelight as she laughed at something Willa whispered. Such a different creature from the frightened girl who'd emerged from that burning tavern clutching newborn dragons. Your castle is beautiful, Daenerys had said to Willa, violet eyes bright with genuine interest. So different from Pentos. The way the moonlight reflects off the water in your harbor. It reminds me of dreams I've had. Dreams? Winifred had leaned forward, green silk rustling. What sort of dreams? The conversation had flowed easily between them as talk of gowns and songs, of places they'd seen or hoped to see. Asher Forrester had watched from his place beside Beska, occasionally offering dry observations that made the women laugh. Even Jorah Mormont, temporarily pardoned but still bearing the weight of his crimes in his weathered face, had seemed to relax slightly. Andar Royce had spent most of the evening discussing the threat beyond the wall with Wylis Manderly, their voices low and urgent. But Ned had found his attention drawn repeatedly to Daenerys and the Manderly girls. The Targaryen princess needed companions her own age, needed to remember she was more than just the mother of dragons. They do you credit, Ned said now, pulling himself back to the present. Both of them. Wyman accepted the compliment with a gracious nod, though his small eyes remained sharp. And yet you still mean to go to King's Landing? The question brought him back to his current predicament. Ned set down his goblet, the metal base clicking against oak. Robert needs to know what's coming from beyond the wall. And these taxes. He shook his head. The North cannot bear them. Not with winter coming. The taxes are one matter. Wyman shifted forward, chair groaning protest. But what of the girl? Ned knew what Wyman meant to say. Daenerys. Our departure from Braavos was noticed, Wyman continued, fingers drumming against his substantial thigh. The burning tavern, the dragons hatching in full view of dozens. The spider has birds in every free city. Word will reach King's Landing, if it hasn't already. The wine turned sour in Ned's mouth. He could see it too clearly. Robert's face purpling with rage, spittle flying as he roared about Dragonspawn. What happens when Robert learns you're harboring a Targaryen? Wyman pressed. Not just any Targaryen, but one with 3 dragons? Memory crashed over Ned like a wave of the throne room, 20 years passed. Small bodies wrapped in Lannister cloaks, red spreading beneath. Robert's laughter echoing off stone as he called them dragonspawn, as he said they deserved it. Princess Alia's blood mixing with her children's on the floor. Ned's hand tightened on the goblet until his knuckles went white. He stared at the wine's surface, seeing blood instead of gold. "My lord!" Wyman's voice came from very far away. Ned forced himself to breathe, to push the images back into their cage. When he looked up, Wyman was watching him with an expression that might have been sympathy on a less calculating face. "What would you have me do?" Ned asked quietly. Wyman's fingers stilled their drumming. "Support her claim." The words dropped into silence like stones into deep water. Ned stared at the Lord of White Harbor, certain he'd misheard. "The dragons will only grow larger," Wyman said, leaning back until his chair creaked ominously. "They're already the size of cats after mere days. In a year, 2, and your own children." He spread his hands. Lord Robb summoned a mug to his hand before half the North. "Whatever power this Luke Skywalker has taught them, it's real. You're suggesting war against Robert. I'm suggesting we consider alternatives." Wyman's voice remained maddeningly calm. "The Riverlands would follow you, seeing Lady Catelyn's father would never stand against her. The Vale loves you well, and Lord Aaron's death has left them rudderless. With dragons and these abilities your children possess, the realm would never accept a queen." The words came out harsher than Ned intended. "Not after the dance. Not after Rhaenyra." But even as he spoke, another thought whispered. But they'd accept a king. They'd accept Daemon. Jon's face flashed in his mind. Those gray eyes that were so like Lyanna's, now knowing the truth of his birth. His sister's son, Rhaegar's last heir. The rightful king if one believed in such things. "Robert is my friend," Ned said, though the words felt like ash. "I won't raise arms against him. There must be another way." "Then how do you propose to hide a girl with 3 dragons?" Wyman asked. "How do you explain her presence when Robert's spies report back?" "Because they will, my lord. They always do." Before Ned could answer, the door burst open. Wylis Manderly stood there, face flushed from running, a small scroll clutched in his meaty fist. "Father," he gasped. "From our friend in King's Landing. Most urgent." Wyman took the message, breaking the seal with surprising delicacy for such thick fingers. His eyes moved across the parchment, and Ned watched the color drain from his face until he looked like old tallow. "What is it?" Ned demanded. Wyman's voice came out strangled. "King Robert is dead." The goblet slipped from Ned's nerveless fingers, wine spreading across the floor like blood. "There's more," Wyman continued, each word dropping like a hammer blow. "You've been accused of hiring assassins to kill him." "What?" The word tore from Ned's throat. "That's madness. And Renly Baratheon has proclaimed Cersei's children bastards born of incest. He's declared himself king." The room spun. Ned gripped the table's edge, wood biting into his palms. Robert dead. His friend, his brother in all but blood, dead. And they blamed him for it? "This makes no sense," he heard himself say. "Renly? Not Stannis." "The message says Renly has the Tyrells behind him since he recently wed Marjorie Tyrell. It seems." "What of Stannis?" Ned's voice came out raw, scraped hollow by grief. "Have your spies heard anything?" Wyman's jowls quivered as he shook his massive head. "Nothing, Ned. Not a whisper." He paused, thick fingers drumming against his thigh. "Though he did sail from King's Landing with the entire royal fleet. Every warship, every galley. Cleaned out the harbor like a thief in the night. When?" "The very morning King Robert rode north, if my sources speak true." The wine pooling at Ned's feet had begun to seep into the rushes, filling the air with its sour-sweet stench. He stared at the spreading stain, mind racing. Stannis taking the fleet before Robert even left the capital. Then perhaps there's truth to Renly's claims. The words tasted like ash. "About the children." "Ned." Wylis leaned forward, sweat still beading his florid face. "Nothing." Ned pressed his palms flat against the table, feeling the grain bite into his skin. "Stannis would never abandon his duty without cause. He knows something, knew something, even then." Wyman's eyes narrowed to slits in his doughy face. "If Lord Stannis suspected the Queen's children were bastards, why not tell the king? Why flee? Because Robert wouldn't have listened." The thought struck with terrible clarity. Not to Stannis. Never to stern, rigid Stannis with his grinding jaw and talk of duty. Fear, Ned said instead. Or wisdom, perhaps both. The Manderleys exchanged quick, furtive glances. The realm, it seems, has made the decision for you. Wyman's voice carried a bitter edge as he lowered himself back into his chair, with groaning beneath his weight. Going to King's Landing means death. Perhaps that's for the best, Wylis offered, though his voice wavered. With the Queen's children. Bastards. The word dropped from Ned's lips like a stone into still water. If Stannis knew. If he took the fleet before Robert even left. His fingers found the table's edge again, gripping until his knuckles went white. Gods! How long has this rot been festering? Wyman shifted, his bulk making the floorboards creak. Long enough that Lord Stannis feared to speak it aloud, apparently. Or knew it would mean war. Ned's jaw tightened. Taking the fleet, he's already chosen his side. Already begun. Ned sank into his chair, covering his face with both hands. Robert's laugh echoed in his memory, and not the bitter laugh from the throne room 20 years ago, but the bright, bold laugh from their youth. Gone now. All of it gone. Through his fingers, he heard Wyman and Wylis speaking. If Renly's proclaimed himself king, he'd send ravens everywhere, Wylis was saying. Why are we hearing this from spies instead of official messages? Maester Theomore, Wyman said slowly. Of House Lannister. A distant cousin to Lord Tywin, I believe. Then he's been intercepting the ravens. Hiding them or destroying them. We should arrest him immediately. No. Ned's voice cut through their planning. He lowered his hands, and something in his face made both Manderleys step back. Arrest him after he sends a raven to Winterfell. I need to reach Robb. My lord, Wyman said carefully. I thought. Ned's head snapped up. What? I thought you knew. Lord Robb rode for the wall some nights past. My son Wendell went with him, along with some of your bannermen. The words hit Ned like a physical blow. He shot to his feet, chair crashing backward. He went where? The shout echoed off stone walls, and somewhere in the castle. A dragon's cry answered, high and sharp and full of fire. Craster's Keep beyond the wall. The horses' hooves crunched through fresh snow as Robb's group crested the final hill. Below them sprawled Craster's Keep, if such a wretched collection of buildings deserved the name. A crude log palisade leaned at drunken angles, gaps stuffed with mud and straw. Inside, pigs rooted through the same yard where children played. 7 hells, Small John muttered. Even our swineherd lives better than this. Women paused in their work as the riders approached. Some clutched rough-spun shawls around swollen bellies. Others, barely past their flowering, carried infants on their hips. A girl who couldn't have seen more than 4 in 10 name days stood heavily pregnant near the well, her face gaunt despite her condition. She watched them with eyes that held too much knowledge for her years. The force pressed against Robb's consciousness like a physical weight. Fear rolled off these women in waves, mixed with a resignation so deep it felt like drowning. Beneath it all pulsed something worse, a hopelessness that had calcified into acceptance. His hands tightened on the reins until leather bit through his gloves. Steady, my lord, Corran said quietly. We knew what we'd find here. The door to the main hall banged open. Craster emerged, and Robb's first thought was that the man looked exactly like what he was, a creature that fed on misery. Thick-bodied and slope-shouldered, he wore furs that might have been fine once but now carried stains that spoke of years without proper cleaning. Gold rings glinted on his fingers, the only clean things about him. His beard, gray and greasy, hung to his chest, but it was what Robb sensed through the force that made his gorge rise. Corruption oozed from Craster like pus from a wound. Cruelty, yes, and a sick pleasure in power over the helpless. Yet underneath lurked something else, something that made Robb's skin crawl. Taint, dark and cold. In through the nose, hold out through the mouth. Master Luke's voice echoed in his memory. Anger clouds judgment. Let it pass through you like wind through leaves. Another stark lordling. Craster's voice boomed across the yard, thick with false welcome. Your uncle passed through not 2 moons past. Couldn't shut up about honor and duty, that one. Craster spat a stream of brown juice into the snow. But you're not here about him, are you? You're here about the king beyond the wall. Lord Karstark shifted in his saddle. You know where the parley is? Course I know. 3 days north where the Milkwater bends. Mance'll be there, if he keeps his word. Craster's piggy eyes fixed on Robb. Your uncle had better manners, boy. knew how to properly greet a friend of the watch. Rob dismounted slowly, each movement deliberate. The snow crunched under his boots as he approached, stopping just outside arm's reach. Lord Craster, we appreciate your hospitality. The words tasted like bile, but they needed information. Behind him, he heard Small John dismount with considerably less grace, muttering something about northern justice that made Lord Glover cough in warning. That's more like it. Craster's grin revealed teeth like old cheese. Guessed right, that's what we have here. You eat my food, sleep under my roof, and we're all friends. His eyes glittered with something unpleasant. Course, friendship goes both ways. A man gets lonely out here, could use some proper steel, maybe some wine. We'll discuss terms after we've rested, Rob said, fighting to keep disgust from his voice. Craster's expression soured. Not much for talking, are you? Just like your uncle. All high and mighty until you need something. He turned to the pregnant girl by the well. Gilly, get these lordlings some food. Not the good stores, mind. The black bread and old mutton'll do for crows and their friends. The girl bobbed her head and scurried toward what passed for a kitchen, her swollen belly making her waddle. Rob watched her go, noting how she kept her eyes down, how her shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow. 19 wives I got, Craster announced, following Rob's gaze. That one's near her time. Where are your sons? The question slipped out before Rob could stop it. Craster's face went still as stone. Around them, every woman in sight froze. Even the children stopped playing. The silence stretched until Rob could hear his own heartbeat. The gods take what's theirs, Craster said finally, his voice flat and dangerous. A man learns not to question the gods out here, boy. You do well to remember that. Through the force, Rob felt a spike of terror from the women. Not fear of Craster, though that was there too. This was different, primal, the kind of fear that came from knowing exactly what happened to those sons, and knowing they could do nothing to stop it. Lord Glover cleared his throat. We've ridden hard, Craster. Perhaps we could settle our horses. Aye, there's room in the pen. Your lordships can sleep in the hall with me. Your men. Craster waved vaguely at a lean-to that looked ready to collapse. They can make do there. As they led their horses to the pen, Small John moved close to Rob. Say the word, my lord, and I'll separate his head from his shoulders. Guessed right be damned. No. Rob kept his voice low but firm. We need to find Uncle Benjen. We need to know what Mance is planning. After that, he let the sentence hang. The women, Lord Karstark said quietly. Gods, Rob, they're his own daughters. I know. The words came out harder than Rob intended. Through the force, he could feel each woman's suffering like individual notes in a symphony of misery. One of them, barely older than Arya, watched them from a doorway with eyes that had seen too much. But not yet. Not until we have what we came for. They settled the horses in silence, each man lost in his own dark thoughts. The wind picked up, driving snow against the palisade with a sound like fingernails on wood. Somewhere in the gathering dusk, a baby cried, thin and desperate. Craster appeared in the doorway of his hall, silhouetted against the firelight within. Food's ready, such as it is. Come and eat, friends of the watch. We'll talk of your uncle and the king beyond the wall. Maybe I'll even tell you why the wildlings fear to raid my keep. He disappeared inside, leaving them standing in the freezing yard. Through the force, Rob felt that dark taint again, stronger now, like something rotten trying to crawl inside his mind. My lord, Corrin said softly. Whatever he is, whatever he's done, we need him. For now. Rob nodded, though every instinct screamed at him to draw his sword. As they walked toward the hall, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. In the snow near the tree line, barely visible in the dying light, stood a figure in white. The proportions were wrong, the stillness too absolute. When Rob blinked, it was gone. But the feeling remained, crawling up his spine like ice. They were being watched, and whatever watched them had been here before many times. The women's terror suddenly made perfect, horrible sense. Inside, he said quietly to his men. Stay together, and keep your hands near your steel. They entered Craster's hall, and the door swung shut behind them with a sound like a coffin closing. Chapter 37. The Cold God's Bargain. Year 299 AC/8 ABY. Craster's Keep beyond the wall. The hall reeked of old smoke and unwashed bodies. Rob lay on the packed earth floor, wrapped in his cloak, listening to the Smolen's thunderous snoring compete with the wind rattling through gaps in the walls. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those pregnant girls, those hollow-eyed children. Through the force, their fear pressed against his consciousness like cold fingers. A floorboard creaked. Rob's hand found his dagger's hilt as a shadow moved between the sleeping forms. The figure stopped, trembling, then took another step forward. "Please, M-Lord." The whisper barely carried over the wind. "Please." Rob sat up slowly, recognizing the pregnant girl from the well. Gilly. Her whole body shook, though whether from cold or terror he couldn't tell. Through the force, waves of desperation rolled off her, mixed with something else. Something fierce and protective that reminded him of his own mother. He rose carefully, not wanting to wake the others, and gestured toward the door. She shrank back, then seemed to gather what little courage she had left. They slipped outside into the bitter night. Snow fell in thick curtains, muffling sound. Rob led her to the lee of the goat pen where they'd have some shelter from the wind. "What is it?" Gilly's teeth chattered as she spoke. "You asked about his sons. About my father's sons." The darkness in her voice made Rob's skin crawl. "What happens to them? The cold gods take them." Tears froze on her cheeks. "That's what he says. But I've seen it, M-Lord. I've seen what takes them." Rob waited, sensing through the force that pushing would only terrify her more. Blue eyes in the dark. Shadows that walk like men but ain't men at all. Her hand went to her swollen belly. "He leaves the babes out in the cold. Just leaves them crying in the snow. And they come. The white shadows come and take them away." The pieces clicked together in Rob's mind with horrible clarity. The figure he'd glimpsed at the tree line. The women's terror when he'd asked about sons. Craster wasn't just surviving out here beyond the wall. He had a pact. A bargain with the others themselves. "How long?" His voice came out rougher than intended. "Always. Long as I can remember. My brothers, my son will share their fate." Fresh tears spilled down her face. "This one's a boy. I can feel it. Strong. Like he's already fighting. Another offering for the cold gods unless. When are to give birth? Soon. Mayhaps a moon. Mayhaps less." Gilly grabbed his sleeve with desperate strength. "I heard you're the son the Stark. Heard the Starks keep their word. Please, M-Lord. When my time comes, when Craster takes him out to the cold, I'll stop it." The words came out before Rob could think them through. But once spoken, they felt right. This was what his father would do. What honor demanded. Gilly's legs nearly gave out with relief. Rob caught her arm, steadying her. "Get back inside before he notices you're gone. We leave for the parley tomorrow, but we'll return. Can you hold on that long?" She nodded frantically. "I'll try, M-Lord. I'll try." As she hurried back toward the hall, Rob remained in the shadows, his mind racing. They couldn't act now, not without losing their guide to Mance's camp. But after, interesting conversation. Rob spun, hand on his sword. Corin Halfhand stood 3 feet away, so still he might have been part of the darkness itself. "How long were you listening?" "Long enough." Corin's scarred face showed no emotion. "Walk with me, Lord Stark. We have much to discuss." They moved away from the buildings, out where the wind would carry their voices into nothing. Corin stopped near a half-dead pine, its branches heavy with snow. "You know," Rob said. "Not a question. I've suspected for years. Never had proof. Never could afford to look too close." Corin's voice held bitter self-recrimination. "The Watch needs this place. It's the only refuge between Castle Black and the Frostfangs. Without it, our rangings would be impossible. So you let him feed babes to the others? What would you have done, boy? Killed him years ago. Then what? The women starve or freeze. The Watch loses its foothold beyond the wall. And the others still come, with or without Craster's offerings." Rob wanted to argue, but the tactical part of his mind, the part Luke had trained to see beyond immediate emotion, understood. It was the same horrible arithmetic of war his father had taught him. Sometimes there were no good choices. "But now we know for certain," Corin continued. "And now we have the strength to do something about it. Your lords, your men. We can take the women somewhere safe. After the parley. I can't risk him warning Mance or signaling his patrons. We go to the parley, learn what we can, then return as promised." Corin's hand moved to his sword. "Then we do what should have been done long ago. The women will need protection. Food. Shelter. They will have to adapt south of the wall. It won't be comfortable, but it'll be better than this. They stood in silence for a moment, snow gathering on their shoulders. Through the force, Rob felt something watching from the darkness beyond the trees. Patient, waiting, hungry. There's something else, Rob said. When we fought those whites 3 nights ago, they were organized, purposeful. Someone or something commands them. The others. Corrin's voice dropped even lower. If Craster truly has a pact with them, he might know more than just where to leave the babes. You think he knows how to summon them? I think a man doesn't survive this long beyond the wall without knowing things that would freeze your blood. Corrin turned back toward the keep. Get some sleep, Lord Stark. Tomorrow we ride north, and I suspect we'll need our strength. As Corrin disappeared into the darkness, Rob remained by the tree, staring out at the forest. Somewhere out there, Uncle Benjen might still be alive. Somewhere out there, Mance Rayder gathered the largest wildling host in memory. And somewhere, in the cold between the trees, Blue Eyes watched and waited for their next offering. Dawn came gray and bitter, the sun a pale suggestion behind heavy clouds. Rob sat at Craster's table, forcing down black bread that tasted of mold and thin porridge that might have been paste. Around him, his lords ate in tense silence, their disgust carefully controlled. The hall stank worse in daylight. Rob could see the dirt ground into the walls, the suspicious stains on the rushes, the fear etched into every female face. One girl, perhaps 12, refilled his cup with trembling hands. Her belly showed the early signs of swelling. Bile rose in Rob's throat. He forced it down, keeping his expression neutral. They needed Craster for 3 more days. Just 3 more days. You're quiet this morning, Stark. Craster gnawed on a piece of meat that might have been rabbit. Or might not. Your southern stomach not liking my hospitality? The food is sufficient. Small John shifted beside him, tension radiating through the force like heat from a forge. Rob pressed calm toward him, a subtle manipulation Luke had taught him. The Umber Heir's shoulders relaxed slightly, though his knuckles stayed white around his cup. Sufficient. Craster laughed, spraying bits of meat. Hear that, wives? Lord Stark finds our feast sufficient. He grabbed the nearest girl, one who couldn't be older than Sansa, and pulled her onto his lap. Maybe this one ain't serving you proper. Should teach her better manners. The girl went rigid with terror. Rob felt her desperate wish to disappear, to become invisible. His jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. The service is fine, Lord Glover said carefully. We're grateful for your generosity. Generous. Aye, that's me. Craster's hand moved along the girl's side in a way that made Rob's skin crawl. Share everything I have, I do. Food, roof, wives if you've a mind. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Rob felt his lord's rage building like pressure behind a dam. One wrong word, one wrong move, and blood would flow. A younger girl, perhaps 8, approached Harrion Karstark with a bowl of porridge. Her hands shook so badly she stumbled, the bowl slipping. Porridge splattered across Harrion's boots. The girl went white. Every woman in the hall froze. Useless bitch. Craster shoved the girl off his lap and stood, his hand rising. I'll teach you to waste food. Rob acted without thinking. Through the force, he pulled at Craster's ankle just as the man stepped forward. Craster's foot caught on nothing, sending him stumbling into the table. Cups overturned. The porridge pot tipped, spilling its contents across Craster's lap. Gods damn it! Craster roared, pawing at the hot paste soaking through his breeches. Accidents happen, Rob said mildly, though his heart hammered. No harm done. Craster's eyes narrowed to slits. For a moment, violence hung in the air like a drawn blade. Then he laughed, harsh and ugly. Accidents. Seemed to be having a lot of those lately. He looked at the girl who'd spilled the porridge. She hadn't moved, hadn't even breathed. Get out of my sight. She fled and Rob felt her relief blanket her. We should prepare to leave, Corrin said, standing. Long ride ahead. Eager to meet the king beyond the wall, are you? Craster settled back into his chair, still wiping at his breeches. Well, don't let me keep you. Sooner you go, sooner you come back. And we'll have such a feast then. Might even have something special to celebrate. His eyes found Gilly, serving at the far end of the hall. Her hand went instinctively to her belly. We shall return soon, Rob said, standing while staring daggers at Craster. I'll be counting every moment, Lord Stark. They saddled their horses in tense silence. The Smoljin's face had gone purple with suppressed rage, while Harrion muttered prayers that sounded more like curses. Even Corrin's rangers, men who'd seen the worst the world could offer, looked sick. Robb checked his saddle straps for the third time, using the repetitive action to center himself. Through the force, he felt movement in the hall. Multiple presences, one terrified, one angry. Gilly emerged from a side door, a thin bundle clutched to her chest. She looked around frantically, then started toward the horses. "Where do you think you're going?" Craster appeared behind her, his face twisted with fury. I just wanted." "You wanted what?" "To run off with these noble lords." He grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises. "You're mine, girl. Bought and bred. You go nowhere." The Smoljin's hand went to his sword. The sound of steel sliding an inch from its sheath rang like a bell in the cold air. Robb caught the Smoljin's wrist, holding it firm. "Not yet." "A misunderstanding," Robb said aloud, his voice carefully level. The girl was likely just curious about the horses. Curious? Craster yanked Gilly back toward the hall. "Curiosity's dangerous beyond the wall, Lord Stark. Gets people killed." As he dragged her past, Gilly's eyes met Robb's. Desperate, pleading. Craster paused at the door, looking back. "Lord Stark, you and yours are always welcome in my hall." His smile was all teeth and malice. "The gods themselves will celebrate your return." He disappeared inside, pulling Gilly with him. The door slammed shut with finality. They mounted in silence and rode from the keep. No one spoke until they were well into the forest, the palisade lost behind snow and trees. Then the Smoljin exploded. "We should go back. Now. Cut that monster's head off and burn the whole festering place." "And accomplish what?" Corrin asked. "Alert every wildling in 20 miles? Lose our chance at this parley while Benjen is behind enemy lines? Start a war with Mance before we even know his numbers? You saw what he is, what he does." "I saw." Robb's voice cut through the argument. "We all saw." He pulled his horse to a stop, turning to face his lords. Through the force, he felt their rage, their disgust, their desperate need for action. His own fury burned just as hot, but Luke had taught him to use emotion, not be ruled by it. "Craster feeds his sons to the others." The words fell like an avalanche. "That's what the girl Gilly told me last night. He leaves the babes in the snow, and the white shadows come for them." Stunned silence. Then Wendell Manderly spoke, his voice hollow. "He's helping them, building their army. Every son for generations," Corrin confirmed. "That's why they don't attack his keep. He's useful to them. Then he dies." Galbart Glover's voice held the promise of violence. "For treason against the living." "Yes," Robb agreed. "But not today. Today we find my uncle. Today we meet with Mance Rayder and learn what we face. Then we return as promised. We end Craster, we save those women, and we burn that cursed place to the ground." "And if Gilly gives birth before we return?" Lord Glover asked quietly. Robb thought of the fierce protectiveness he'd felt from her, that mother's love already burning bright. "She'll hold on. She has to." They rode north in grim determination, following the Milkwater's frozen course. Behind them, Robb felt something in the force, a darkness waiting, watching, patient as winter itself. The parley with Mance Rayder awaited, but his thoughts remained with a terrified girl and her unborn son, counting the hours until salvation or damnation. Winterfell, the north. Bran sat cross-legged in the Godswood, eyes closed, reaching for the force as Master Luke had shown him. The Weirwood's presence pressed against his awareness, vast and ancient, filled with whispers he could almost understand. Around him, Winterfell bustled with its usual activity, but here beneath the heart tree, everything felt distant, muted. "Breathe," he reminded himself, mimicking the rhythm Jon had taught him before leaving. "Feel the connections." The stones before him trembled, just a fraction, barely visible, but enough to send triumph surging through his chest. He'd been practicing every spare moment since Robb rode to the wall, determined to prove himself as capable as his brothers. Arya made it look effortless, lifting pebbles and sending them skipping across the Godswood pool. Even Sansa had finally succeeded after her initial fear, though she still approached the force with cautious uncertainty. But Bran wanted more than pebbles. He wanted to be strong, to be useful. The stones lifted an inch, 2 inches. His concentration wavered with excitement, and it dropped with a soft thud against the earth. "Better," Arya said from her perch in the branches above. She'd taken to climbing the weirwood despite Mother's protests, claiming it helped her feel the Force more clearly. You held it longer that time. Not long enough. Bran opened his eyes, frustration bleeding into his voice. Jon could lift 3 stones at once as high as he wanted before he left. Robb even picked up Rickon with the Force. They're older. Arya swung down, landing with cat-like grace that made Bran's chest tighten with envy. And they've had more practice. Robb's been gone for weeks. Bran stared at the stone, willing it to move again through sheer determination. What if something happens? What if the dead things come here, and I can't help because I'm not strong enough? Arya's expression softened. She settled beside him, her hand finding his shoulder. You're stronger than you think, Bran. You see things the rest of us don't. Those visions. The crow. The words escaped before Bran could stop them. Arya went still. You're still dreaming about it? Every night. Sometimes multiple times, jerking him from sleep with images that lingered like frost on glass. The 3-eyed crow had been a curiosity at first, strange but not frightening. Now its presence filled his dreams with increasing urgency, its voice a rasp that seemed to echo from somewhere deep and cold. It wants me to follow it, Bran admitted quietly. North, beyond the wall. It says I need to learn, that there's power waiting if I'm brave enough to claim it. Robb told you not to listen. Arya's voice carried an edge of worry. He said it might be dangerous. Robb isn't here. The bitterness surprised Bran with its intensity. Father's in Braavos. Jon's in Oldtown. Everyone who could actually fight is gone. And I'm stuck doing nothing, like a useless sack. He hadn't meant to say it. Arya squeezed his shoulder. You're not useless, Bran. Then why does it feel that way? Before Arya could answer, the world tilted. Not physically, but his awareness lurched sideways into something else entirely. Vision. Snow. Endless snow stretching across a frozen wasteland beneath a sky the color of old bruises. In the distance, something moved. A banner, tattered and stained, bearing a flayed man that seemed to writhe in the wind. Blood spread across pristine white, impossibly red, impossibly bright. Screams echoed from nowhere and everywhere at once. Then Sansa's face, twisted in terror, her mouth open in a shriek Bran couldn't hear. Chains bound her wrists. Behind her, shadows moved with purpose, their eyes burning blue like frozen stars. The crow descended, massive wings blotting out the nightmare sky. Its third eye opened, a vertical slash of red that saw everything, knew everything. You could save her, it whispered, its voice like wind through dead trees. You could save them all. The power is yours, Brandon Stark. You need only reach for it. Come north. Come to me. Learn what you truly are. Bran gasped, slamming back into his body so hard he nearly toppled sideways. Arya caught him, her face pale with alarm. Bran? What happened? Your eyes went white. Sansa. His voice shook. I saw Sansa. She was screaming. And there were chains and those things with blue eyes. The whites. Arya's grip tightened. Are you certain? The crow showed me. Bran's hands trembled in his lap. It said I could save her if I was strong enough. That I need to go north, beyond the wall, to learn what I am. Arya's expression hardened. That's exactly what Robb warned against. These visions could be tricks, Bran. Ways to lure you into danger. What if they're not? The question burst from him with desperate force. What if Sansa really is in danger, and I'm the only one who can see it? What if everyone's counting on me to be strong, and I'm too afraid to do what's necessary? He thought of Robb, riding into the frozen north to face the walking dead. Of Jon, traveling to Oldtown to research ancient evils. Even Sansa had faced an assassin with nothing but her nascent Force abilities. Everyone in his family had found their courage, their purpose. Everyone except him. I'm tired of being helpless, Bran said quietly. The Force is the only thing that makes me feel like I matter, like I could actually help instead of just existing. Arya studied him for a long moment, conflict warring across her features. Finally, she nodded slowly. Then we practice harder, together. But we tell Mother about the visions, Bran. We don't keep secrets about things this important. She'll just worry more. Bran picked up the stone again, focusing his will upon it. She already watches me like I might disappear. Because she loves you, stupid. Arya's tone carried affection beneath the insult. But fine. We practice first, then we tell her. Deal? Deal. The stone lifted smoothly this time, rising to eye level and holding steady. Bran's concentration sharpened, the force flowing through him with greater ease than ever before. Perhaps the vision had shaken something loose, or perhaps desperation made him stronger. Either way, he felt the power responding to his need, his fear, his determination to never be helpless again. Good, the crow's voice whispered in the back of his mind. Very good, Brandon Stark. You're learning. Soon you'll be ready. Bran pushed the voice away and focused on the stone, on Arya's encouraging smile, on the warmth of the weirwood at his back. But even as he practiced, part of him wondered if the crow was right. If real strength required sacrifices he wasn't yet brave enough to make. That night, the dreams came with renewed ferocity. Bran stood in a vast cavern carved from ice and stone, its ceiling lost in darkness above. Roots thick as tree trunks snaked across the walls, pulsing with a dim red light that cast everything in shades of blood and shadow. At the cavern's center, a figure sat enthroned upon a weirwood stump, so ancient and withered he seemed more root than man. The three-eyed crow perched on the figure's shoulder, its red eye fixed on Bran with terrible intensity. "You see me now," the withered man said, though his lips didn't move. His voice resonated directly in Bran's skull. "You see what you could become, what you must become, if you wish to save those you love." "Who are you?" Bran's dream voice echoed strangely in the cavern. "I am the last Green Seer, the three-eyed crow, the watcher in the dark." The figure's one remaining eye opened, milky and blind. "I have waited a long time for you, Brandon Stark. Waited for one strong enough to take my place, to see what must be seen and do what must be done." Images flashed through Bran's mind. Robb, surrounded by whites in a frozen forest. Jon, facing men with swords drawn in a southern castle. Sansa, chained in a dark cell while something inhuman approached. Arya, running through shadows with terror on her face. Rickon, small and alone, crying for help that wouldn't come. "They will all fall," the Green Seer said, "unless you become what you were meant to be. The power is here waiting. All you need do is come to me. Come north. Come home." "This is a trick." Bran tried to back away, but his legs didn't work even in dreams. "You're trying to lure me away from Winterfell. I am trying to save you, to save your family, to save the world of men from the long night that comes." The crow spread its wings, and suddenly Bran saw through its eyes. Saw an army of the dead stretching to the horizon, their blue eyes burning with cold fire. Saw the wall crumbling beneath their assault. Saw Winterfell's towers burning, its people fleeing in terror. Saw his mother's face, frozen in death, her eyes turned that terrible blue. "No!" Bran screamed. "Then stop it," the Green Seer commanded. "You have the gift, the sight, the power to change what will be into what should be. But only if you're willing to sacrifice comfort for strength, safety for purpose. I don't know how. Come to me. I will teach you. I will show you how to save them. All of them." The word resonated through Bran's entire being as the vision shattered. Bran woke gasping, his bedclothes soaked with sweat despite the room's chill. Moonlight streamed through his window, casting silver patterns across the floor. For a moment, he simply breathed, trying to separate dream from reality. But the images lingered. Sansa's scream, his mother's dead eyes, the wall falling. All of it felt too vivid to be mere nightmare, too specific to be random fear. What if the crow was right? What if he really could prevent those horrors, but only by going north? Only by claiming this power the Green Seer promised? Bran's hands clenched in his blankets. He thought of Master Luke's warnings about the dark side, about how fear and desperation could lead to terrible choices. But Master Luke was gone. Everyone was gone. And if the visions were true, they'd all die unless someone did something. Unless he did something. Bran moved through Winterfell's corridors like a ghost, keeping to shadows and servant passages. His heart hammered against his ribs, and not from exertion, but from the weight of what he was about to do. Every distant voice sent him pressing against cold stone until it passed. He couldn't let anyone see, couldn't let them stop him. The kitchen passage led him out through a door servants used for hauling water. Cold air bit his face the moment he stepped outside. "Come to me." The Godswood's ironwood gate stood open and Bran slipped through, and the world changed. His breath misted as he approached the heart tree, each exhale a small ghost dissolving into nothing. Then he saw the face. The carved features wept. Red sap streamed from the eyes, thick as blood, pooling in the bark's deep grooves before dripping to roots below. The mouth hung open in a silent scream or prayer. Bran couldn't tell which. More sap welled there, staining the wood like a wound that wouldn't close. This isn't normal, even for a heart tree. But his feet carried him forward anyway. Some force pulled at his chest, reeling him in like a fish on a line. The air grew colder with each step. His breath came faster. The sap gleamed black-red in the starlight, still flowing, still weeping as Bran's hand rose without conscious thought. His fingers trembled as they stretched toward the trunk. Don't. Master Luke and Robb warned you not to do anything foolish. But the dreams. His palm met wet bark. The world exploded into white light and screaming wind. Chapter 38. Pretty and Dangerous. Year 299 AC/8 ABY. Highgarden, the Reach. The road to Highgarden stretched before them like a ribbon of packed earth threading through an ocean of color. Jon had never seen anything quite like it. Even from a distance, the great castle rose above fields that bloomed in every shade imaginable. Roses certainly, but also daisies, lavender, sunflowers, and a dozen other varieties he couldn't name. The air itself seemed sweeter here, thick with pollen and the hum of bees going about their work. Beside him, Master Luke sat straighter in his saddle, and Jon felt a sudden surge of joy through the force. Pure, uncomplicated delight. Jon raised an eyebrow at his teacher. Master! Luke's expression held something almost boyish. I grew up with sand, Jon. Only sand. Twin suns beating down on endless dunes. Moisture farmers scratching out a living from rocks and vapor. This, he gestured at the flowering fields. This is beautiful. The sands of wherever you are from could never compare to the sands of Dorne. Sarella Sand declared from behind them, her voice carrying that particular pride Jon had come to recognize in her over their journey. Dornish sands are golden, warm, and they stretch beneath mountains that touch the sky. They cradle ancient castles and hide secret springs. Your homes sound rather dreary, Master Luke. You are not wrong, Luke admitted with a laugh. Though they made me appreciate places like this all the more. Jon found himself smiling despite the knot of tension in his stomach. The festive atmosphere grew stronger as they approached the castle proper. Banners snapped in the breeze, green and gold, displaying the golden rows of House Tyrell. Pavilions dotted the grounds, and the distant sound of music drifted across the fields. To celebrate Renly's marriage to Margaery Tyrell, their party drew curious stares as they passed through the outer gates. The Hightower banners they displayed opened doors, but Jon caught the whispers. Northern accents were rare this far south, and his own dark coloring marked him as clearly as any banner. A knight in gleaming armor approached, his surcoat bearing the golden rose. He clasped hands with the Hightower captain like an old friend, their easy banter speaking of old familiarity together or perhaps tourneys shared. Ser Garland, the captain said warmly. Still keeping your brother's roses from wilting? Someone has to tend the garden while Loras preens, the knight replied with good humor. He turned to their group, his gaze sweeping over them with the practiced assessment of a seasoned warrior. When his eyes settled on Jon, then lingered on Master Luke, Jon felt himself being weighed and measured. I am Ser Garland Tyrell, he said, his tone friendly despite the scrutiny. Welcome to Highgarden. King Renly awaits Lord Snow and Master Skywalker. The rest of your companions will be shown to quarters where they might refresh themselves from the road. There's to be a feast tonight. Jon exchanged a quick glance with Luke. King Renly, what in the hell's happened now? We're honored by your hospitality, Ser Garland, Jon said, inclining his head. What else could he say? To refuse would be an insult, and father had enough troubles without Jon adding to them. As they dismounted, Sam moved past Jon, close enough to whisper, "Be careful." Jon nodded slightly, remembering their conversations on the road. Sam had spent hours telling him about Lady Olenna Tyrell, the Queen of Thorns. Her reputation for cunning and manipulation was legendary, and Sam had been adamant about one thing. If you're being summoned to Highgarden, it's because Lady Olenna wants you there. Lord Renly likely doesn't care about the Oakenshield incident at all. She's the one pulling the strings. The words echoed in Jon's mind as servants led their horses away and Garland gestured for him and Luke to follow. Have you ever fought in a tourney, Luke? Garland asked as they walked through courtyards blooming with roses. No, Luke replied simply. Garland's smile widened. You should consider entering the one we're holding in a few days. It's in honor of King Renly's coronation and my sister Margaery's elevation as queen. We could use more variety in the competition. Too many reachmen showing off for each other gets dull. He turned to Jon, looking him up and down with an appraising eye. You might want to join as well, Lord Snow. You're already in Highgarden. Might as well show off some of that famous northern strength. Jon felt heat creep up his neck. I'm no Lord, Ser Garland. Just Jon. As you say. Garland's tone suggested he thought otherwise, but he didn't press the matter. They climbed a wide staircase, passing through halls decorated with tapestries showing the Reach's bounty. Jon's attention wandered until movement ahead made him look up. A woman descended the stairs toward them. She couldn't have been more than Jon's age, perhaps a year older. Her brown hair fell in artful curls around a face that would have made the singers weep. She wore a gown of green silk that matched her eyes, cut to flatter without being improper. Everything about her spoke of careful cultivation, like the roses in the fields outside. Garland, she said, her voice warm and musical. I didn't know we had guests arriving. Marjorie. Garland's tone held obvious affection. May I present Jon Snow of Winterfell and his curious guard Luke Skywalker. Gentlemen, my sister, Lady Marjorie Tyrell. Queen Marjorie, I should say. Marjorie's eyes found Jon's, and he couldn't look away. Through the force, he felt a tumult of emotions from her. Curiosity, certainly. Calculation. Something that might have been loneliness buried deep. Determination. Ambition. Fear. They swirled together in a pattern he couldn't begin to untangle. Lord Snow, she said, her lips curving into a smile that didn't quite reach those complex eyes. Ser Skywalker, welcome to Highgarden. Jon forced himself to look away, focusing on a tapestry over her shoulder. Just Jon, my lady, and thank you for your hospitality. You're too modest. Her gaze lingered on him a moment longer before she turned to Luke. I've heard interesting things about you, Ser Skywalker. My husband tells me you are a teacher for House Stark, though the subject you teach has been elusive to determine. I try to broaden perspectives, Luke replied neutrally. Marjorie laughed, the sound practiced but genuine. I'm sure you do. I look forward to speaking with you both at the feast tonight. Grandmother has been quite eager to meet you. She swept past them in a whisper of silk, leaving Jon acutely aware that he'd barely managed to string two words together. Beside him, Luke's presence in the Force remained calm, but Jon thought he detected amusement. They continued up the stairs to a solar that overlooked the gardens. Garland knocked once before opening the door. King Renly, grandmother. I present Jon Snow and Luke Skywalker. Jon stepped inside, taking in the room at a glance. Renly Baratheon sat in a high-backed chair, looking every inch a king despite his youth. He wore black and gold, a crown resting on his dark hair. The resemblance to King Robert was there in the strong jaw and broad shoulders, but Renly carried himself with a grace Robert had lost to wine and years. Beside him sat an elderly woman so small she seemed almost childlike. But her eyes were sharp as Valyrian steel, and they fixed on Jon with an intensity that made him want to check his clothing for stains. Thank you, Garland, Renly said. That will be all. Garland bowed and withdrew, leaving Jon and Luke alone with the self-proclaimed king and the Queen of Thorns. Lord Snow, Ser Luke. Renly's voice was pleasant, welcoming even. I'm delighted you made it to Highgarden safely. I appreciate you coming at my request. Request. Jon kept his expression neutral, though the word rankled. It hadn't felt much like a request when Lord Leighton delivered the summons. Congratulations on your ascension, Your Grace, Jon said carefully, though I confess I'm troubled by the news. What happened to King Robert? The room seemed to grow colder. Olenna's eyes never left Jon's face. It seems the Lannisters have killed him, she said, her voice thin but carrying absolute certainty. Jon's breath caught. Luke's presence in the Force rippled with surprise. The Lannisters? I have ears in the Red Keep, Renly said, leaning forward. Good ears. Queen Cersei murdered my brother to hide the fact that her children are bastards. Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen. All of them born of incest with Jaime Lannister, not Robert's blood at all. Jon's mind raced. He was expecting the news of the royal children being bastards, but the death of the king? And in such a manner? Then the succession. But that's not why you're here, Renly continued, his tone shifting to something lighter. We need to discuss the incident at Oakenshield. Jon met his gaze steadily. I won't make excuses for what happened, Your Grace. Lord Hewitt was mistreating his daughter. We intervened. My father's men helped me. We left. Renly's eyebrows rose slightly. Honest. Your father's son in that, at least. He glanced at Olenna. What do you think, Lady Olenna? I think honesty is refreshing, Olenna said, though her attention had shifted to Luke. I also think the reports about the harbor being destroyed by some mysterious force are rather interesting. Is that true, Sir Luke? Luke's expression didn't change. It could be true, my lady, from a certain point of view. Olenna's eyes narrowed, but John thought he saw the ghost of a smile touch her lips. Renly coughed, drawing attention back to himself. Yes, well, the harbor. Lord Hewitt has treated his bastard daughter quite poorly, from what I understand. I can appreciate why you, being a bastard yourself, would come to her defense. And since no one was actually killed, this matter can be resolved without too harsh a punishment. He paused, as if waiting for John to thank him. John remained silent. I have great respect for Lord Eddard, Renly continued. I wouldn't want to strain relations with the North over something so minor, especially not now, when the realm needs unity. What's to happen to Phalia? John asked. Olenna spoke before Renly could answer. My granddaughter Queen Marjorie has need of handmaidens. I've already spoken with her about taking the girl into her service. Queen Marjorie has graciously agreed. John felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. At least Phalia would be safe, protected by the future queen's household. However, Olenna continued, her tone sharpening, you still acted foolishly. There must be some consequence. Renly nodded, warming to his role. The tourney in a few days. The North has no representatives competing. I want you to take part, Jon Snow. Represent your homeland in the games. He turned to Luke. And you, Sir Luke. Robert mentioned you to me before his murder. Tyrion Lannister spoke of you as well. A foreign stranger teaching in Eddard Stark's court. I'd very much like to see what you can do. Consider your participation in the tourney as penance for the harbor. John glanced at Luke, who met his eyes. Through their connection, Luke's voice touched John's mind. A clever solution. He punishes you without truly punishing you, satisfying the Reach Lords without angering your father. We should accept, and this will allow us to leave for the North after the tourney without any real conflict. John nodded slowly. I accept, Your Grace. Luke sighed, but inclined his head. As do I. Excellent. Renly clapped his hands together. You'll only need to choose one event to compete in. The melee, the joust, or the archery. We'll discuss the details at the feast tonight. For now, I'm sure you'd like to rest from your journey. It was a dismissal clear as a bell. John bowed, as did Luke, but Renly rose first, brushing invisible dust from his doublet. Lady Olenna, if you'll excuse me, Loras wishes to speak with me privately. Olenna waved him off with one spotted hand. Go. I'm sure your knight has something terribly urgent to discuss. The dry edge in her tone made John's ears burn, though he wasn't entirely sure why. Renly either didn't notice or chose to ignore it, sweeping from the solar with the easy grace of a man who'd never questioned his place in the world. The door closed. The silence that followed pressed against John's skin like a held breath. John's hand moved to his tunic before he could second-guess himself. My lady, if I might have a moment more of your time? Olenna's gaze sharpened, the milky film over her eyes doing nothing to diminish their intensity. Oh, and here I thought we were finished. Come on then. I have only so much time left in these old bones. John walked back toward her chair. Her guards' hands went to their sword hilts immediately, but Olenna raised one spotted hand in a gesture of calm. John reached into his tunic and withdrew the sealed journal Lord Leighton had given him. Lord Leighton Hightower asked me to give you this, my lady. Olenna took it, her fingers surprisingly steady. She turned it over, examining the seal. Did he tell you what it contains? No, my lady. Could you summarize it for me? John met her gaze. I didn't read it. It wasn't meant for me. Silence stretched between them. Olenna studied him like a maester examining a rare manuscript. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Pretty and honorable. Quite a potent combination. Dangerous, too. Heat flooded John's face. He was acutely aware of Renly watching with obvious amusement, of Luke's carefully neutral presence. Thank you for your time, my lady. John bowed again and fled before his face could burn any hotter. In the corridor outside, Luke fell into step beside him. John could feel his teacher's amusement through the force. Not a word, John muttered. I wasn't going to say anything. You were thinking it loudly enough. Luke's soft laugh followed them down the stairs, past tapestries of roses and plenty, toward whatever quarters had been prepared for them. Pretty and honorable. The words echoed in his mind. He wasn't sure which bothered him more, that she'd called him pretty, or that she'd made it sound like a weakness. White Harbor, the north. The Wolf's Den gods would smelled of salt and pine, so different from the perfumed gardens of Pentos that Daenerys still caught herself inhaling deeply, seeking familiar scents that would never come. The heart tree here was massive as it seeped into the castle, its pale bark marked with a face whose red sap seemed to weep in the morning light. Morgus shifted restlessly in her lap, his black scales warm against her hands, while Viserion and Regal prowled through the fallen leaves nearby. "They're growing faster than I expected," Willa Manderly observed, settling onto the ground beside Daenerys with a grace that belied her northern practicality. She'd brought a basket of fish, their silver scales catching the weak sunlight filtering through the branches overhead. Daenerys stroked Morga's neck, feeling the heat building beneath his scales. Lord Stark said the same. "He worries what will happen when they're too large to hide." "My grandfather worries about same." Willa tore a fish in half, offering a piece toward Viserion, who approached with cautious curiosity. "It's what makes him a good lord. He sees problems before they arrive." "But this isn't a problem, is it?" The cream and gold dragon sniffed the offering, then delicately plucked it from Willa's fingers. Daenerys tensed, ready to intervene if her children showed aggression. But Viserion simply settled at Willa's feet and began tearing into the fish with quiet contentment. A low rumble emerged from his throat, almost like a cat's purr. "He likes you," Daenerys said, unable to hide her surprise. The dragons had been wary of everyone except her since hatching. Even Lord Stark kept his distance, though whether from caution or discomfort, she couldn't say. Willa smiled, running her fingers along Viserion's spine. "My grandmother used to say the Manderlys have had a certain touch with animals, ever since our days in the Reach. That's not how it works, isn't it?" Willa's eyes gleamed with amusement as she fed Viserion another piece. "You walked through fire unburned. Your dragons hatched from stone eggs that should have been dead for centuries. I think the rules we thought we knew don't apply anymore." Daenerys watched Regal investigate the base of the heart tree, his green scales brilliant against the white bark. Morgus remained in her lap, his red eyes fixed on Willa with an intensity that might have been threatening if not for Viserion's obvious comfort. The sight should have reassured her, this easy acceptance by her children of someone outside their small circle. Instead, it highlighted how little she understood about the creatures she'd brought into the world. "The Manderlys are from the Reach?" Daenerys said, trying to recall one of the many lessons Viserys had drilled into her during their wandering years, but failing to remember anything on the Manderlys. "Is that why you also worship the Seven?" Willa's expression shifted, taking on the quality of someone settling into a favorite tale. "Close enough," Willa said, her fingers still working the fish into smaller pieces. "We keep both the old and the new." Viserion's head tilted at the sound of her voice, his cream-colored scales catching the dappled sunlight filtering through the weirwood's branches. "The Manderlys are old," Willa continued, her tone taking on the cadence of a maester reciting history. "So old we can't remember if the River Mander was named after our house or the other way around. First men blood runs in our veins, same as the Starks." "Then why leave the Reach?" Daenerys asked. "We didn't leave." Willa's mouth twisted. "We were driven out. King Persean III Gardner feared our influence. Too much land, too many swords, too many lords who looked to White Harbor for guidance instead of Highgarden. Political overreach, they called it, though my grandmother had other words for it." She fed Viserion another morsel. "Exile, that's what it was. Sore, friendless, fighting for our lives." Morgus shifted in Daenerys's lap, his tail curling around her wrist. "The Starks took us in when no one else would," Willa said. "Loyalty." The word tasted strange in Daenerys's mouth. Viserys had taught her that loyalty was a currency, bought and sold like Myrish lace. Yet here sat Willa, speaking of it as something solid and enduring as the stones of White Harbor itself. Willa studied her with eyes that seemed older than her years. "You're thinking about what your brother told you, about the Starks and the Targaryens." Daenerys's hand stilled on Morgus' scales. "How did you get this look?" Willa interrupted gently. "Like you're trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. I've seen it before, when father negotiates with merchants who don't trust him because of some old slight their grandfather suffered." She tore another fish, offering pieces to both Viserion and Regal, who had wandered closer. "You can't trust what your brother said about House Stark. He hated them for helping topple the Targaryens. That hatred colored everything he taught you. The words struck deeper than Daenerys expected. She thought of Viserys' rants about the usurper's dogs, his spittle flying as he described the treachery of those who'd abandoned their rightful king. The Starks had been chief among his villains, second only to Robert Baratheon himself. Just because one house dislikes another doesn't mean every house shares that hatred. Willa continued, her voice taking on a lecturer's cadence. The Boltons despise us for our wealth and southern ways, but that doesn't make every northern house our enemy. The Freys resent the Tullys for 1,000 petty reasons. Yet the twins don't burn. Hatred is personal, not universal. House Stark betrayed mine. The protest emerged sharper than Daenerys intended. Morgause hissed softly, sensing her agitation. They fought against my father, helped Robert take the throne that was my family's by right, even with the terrible mistakes made by my father. That's not hatred speaking. That's history. Willa didn't flinch from the heat in her voice. Instead, she met Daenerys's eyes with a steadiness that reminded her uncomfortably of Lord Stark himself. And who told you that history? Your brother, who was a child when it happened. The same brother who struck you and would have sold you to the Dothraki for an army? The observation landed like a physical blow. Daenerys opened her mouth to defend Viserys, then closed it again. What defense could she offer? He had hit her. He had arranged her marriage to Khal Drogo without asking her wishes. He had cared more for his crown than her happiness. Even your handmaiden betrayed you, Willa said, her tone softening. The girl you thought loyal, who helped you flee Pentos, most likely for coin because she was desperate or greedy or afraid. Yet here you sit, under Stark protection, raising your dragons freely in a godswood dedicated to their gods. Not yours. Lord Stark could have left you in that burning tavern. Could have taken your dragons and left you to the bounty hunters. Could have delivered you to King Robert for a reward that would have cleared any of the North's debts twice over. Daenerys stroked Morga's head, feeling the truth of those words settle into her bones. Lord Stark had done none of those things. He defended her against 11 armed men, risked his life and his men's lives, brought her north to safety despite the political complications. He'd even told her about Daemon, about the nephew she shared with him, though that knowledge could destroy them both if it reached the wrong ears. So who is the real villain? Willa asked quietly. The man who protects you, or the brother who taught you to hate the man who protects you now? Before Daenerys could formulate an answer, Willa's expression shifted into something bright and mischievous. Speaking of complicated relationships, have you heard the rumor that Asher Forrester sent a raven to Gwyn Whitehill and got an earful from Lord Stark? The abrupt change in topic made Daenerys blink. What? Asher and Gwyn? Willa leaned forward conspiratorially, clearly delighted by this new subject. The Forresters and Whitehills have hated each other for generations, fighting over ironwood groves and insults older than my grandmother. Yet I've seen Asher, making moon eyes at the enemy's daughter in feasts before. Well, Willa said, her eyes glinting with wicked amusement. At least the distance between White Harbor and High Point means they can't make things worse by actually seeing each other. Though knowing Asher, he'd probably swim the Bay of Ice just to get another earful from Lord Whitehill about how Forresters are all tree-stealing bastards. Daenerys found herself rolling her eyes despite the heaviness still sitting in her chest. You're terrible. I'm observant. Willa grinned, feeding Viserion another piece of fish. There's a difference. Besides, someone needs to pay attention to these things. Both my father and grandfather are too busy with politics and trade agreements. Mother only cares about marriages that advance our house. But me, I like a good story, especially one where star-crossed lovers from feuding families find each other despite everything trying to keep them apart. That sounds like something from a song. The best stories usually are. Willa stood, brushing fish scales from her skirts. I should return before Mother sends guards looking for me. She still doesn't trust that your dragons won't eat me, no matter how many times I tell her Viserion is perfectly gentle. She paused, her expression turning serious again. Think about what I said, Daenerys, about trust and loyalty and who really deserves your hatred. History is written by people with their own purposes. Sometimes you need to look at what's happening now, not what you were told happened then. Daenerys nodded, not trusting her voice. Willa squeezed her shoulder once, then departed through the Godswood Gate, leaving Daenerys alone with her dragons and her thoughts. The morning air felt colder without Willa's presence. Daenerys gathered her children close, Morgause in her lap, Viserion and Rhaegal pressing against her sides. Their warmth seeped through her clothing, a comfort she'd come to depend on during the long nights aboard Lord Manderley's ship. She needed to decide what came next. The dragons were growing, yes, but they were still small enough to hide. Lord Stark had given her safety, but safety wasn't a throne. King Robert was dead now, and the realm would tear itself apart over the succession, especially with Renly claiming the crown and declaring Cersei's children bastards. The thought circled back to Daemon, Jon Snow, who was really a prince, the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, her nephew, the rightful heir to the Iron Throne by every law of succession, bastard or not. The realm needed a Targaryen king, someone with a legitimate claim that couldn't be openly disputed. She needed to convince Lord Stark to support Daemon's claim, not Robert's bastards or Renly's ambition. Daemon had the blood, the name, the right. With dragons at his back and the North's armies behind him, he could unite the 7 kingdoms before the long night Lord Stark feared descended from beyond the wall. But how to convince a man who'd spent 15 years hiding a Targaryen prince that the time had come to reveal him? Lord Stark valued honor above all else, yet he'd built his entire life around a lie to protect his sister's son. Would he see Daemon's claim as justice, or as a death sentence for the boy he'd raised? Daenerys looked down at Morgause, studying his molten gold eyes. The dragon stared back with an intelligence that seemed beyond his few weeks of life. The world seemed to shift as she held Morgause's gaze. Not physically, but something deeper, like falling into a dream while still awake. The godswood around her dissolved into gray, ethereal mist that swirled with shapes she couldn't quite identify. Voices whispered at the edge of hearing, speaking words and languages she'd never learned but somehow understood. Mother of dragons, daughter of death, the blood calls to blood, and the fire answers. Daenerys tried to pull away, but Morgause's eyes held her fast. The mist thickened, taking on colors that shouldn't exist, hues that hurt to perceive. She saw flames dancing in patterns that spelled out futures and pasts, saw dragons larger than castles breathing fire across frozen wastelands, saw a great eye opening in the north, blue and cold and hungry. Above her head, unnoticed, the face carved into the heart tree began to weep. Not sap, but something darker, richer. Blood, red as rubies, red as dragon fire, red as the eyes that watched from beyond the wall. It dripped down the pale bark in slow rivulets, gathering at the base of the trunk before flowing outward in thin streams. One stream touched Daenerys' silver hair where it pooled on the ground behind her. The contact sent a shock through her system, and all she saw was darkness. Chapter 39, Thrones of Iron, Thrones of Root. Year 299 AC/8 ABY. Oh! The world snapped into existence around Bran like a candle flame springing to life in darkness. He stood and the ground beneath his feet shimmered, neither stone nor water but something in between. It rippled outward from where he stood, spreading in concentric circles like a pebble dropped into a still pond. The sensation was peculiar, as if he balanced on the skin of a soap bubble, fragile yet impossibly strong. Bran took a step. The surface gave slightly, then held. Another step, and the ripples spread farther, carrying light with them. Light. It was everywhere and nowhere at once. Not the harsh glare of summer sun or the warm glow of hearth fire, but a soft, luminous mist that seemed to emanate from the very air itself. It swirled around him in lazy currents, neither bright enough to blind nor dim enough to obscure. The mist held no color he could name, existing somewhere between pearl and silver, between moonlight and starshine. He turned slowly, drinking in the impossible vista that surrounded him. Gateways, hundreds of them, thousands perhaps, they stretched into infinity in every direction. Tall rectangular arches of shimmering, ethereal light. Each one pulsed with its own rhythm, its own heartbeat. They looked like doorways woven from magic, their edges crackling with barely contained energy. Through the nearest gateway, Bran glimpsed a vessel sailing among the stars, but not sailing, not truly. It moved in ways that defied everything he understood from Maester Lupin's teachings. The thing was metal, he thought, though no metal he'd ever seen gleamed quite like that. It twisted through the black void between distant suns, leaving trails of light that bent and curved impossibly, as if the very fabric of the night sky warped around it. The ship, if it was a ship, had no sails, no oars, no visible means of movement. It simply was cutting through emptiness that went on forever. Bran's stomach lurched watching it. His mind scrambled for comparison, for understanding, but found nothing. It was like trying to grasp smoke, or explain color to someone born blind. The wrongness of it pressed against his thoughts, Yet he couldn't look away. The vessel moved with purpose, heading somewhere beyond his comprehension, and the sheer enormity of the darkness surrounding it made Bran feel smaller than a grain of sand. Smaller than nothing. Another gateway showed his father. Father stood in a godswood Bran didn't recognize, his face carved from granite and purpose. Father's shoulders drew tight beneath his cloak, the leather creaking as his spine went rigid. The word guards formed on Father's lips, sharp and commanding, the voice that sent men running. Then Bran saw what had stolen Father's breath. A girl slumped against the heart tree's pale trunk, her body folded like a broken doll. Silver gold hair spilled across bark and root, so bright it seemed to drink the godswood's dim light and give it back transformed. Her head lolled to one side, face hidden, but Bran caught the angle of her cheekbone, the aristocratic line of her jaw. Something about those features tugged at the edges of recognition, not memory exactly, but something deeper, the shape of old kings in tapestries. She wasn't moving, not breathing, maybe, just draped against the weirwood like discarded cloth. One pale hand pressed to the carved face as if she'd been reaching for something when her strength gave out. Movement near the girl's feet caught his attention as three small shapes clustered against her legs. Dragons. Tiny ones, no bigger than cats. Their scales gleaming bronze and cream and midnight blue in the godswood's half-light. They chirped, high and sharp, the sound piercing through the cosmic hum like needles. Their wedge-shaped heads swiveled toward the girl, then away, then back again. One nuzzled her ankle with its snout. Another spread wings barely larger than Bran's hand. Membranes stretched taut between delicate bone, and keened. They were worried. Father's fear bled through the gateway, thick and choking, but the other gates called to him Oswell. Other gateways showed flashes of battles, coronations, births, deaths. In one, Jon and Robb dueled with practice swords while Master Luke watched. In another, Sansa stood before an enormous hall addressing people like a queen would. A third showed Arya running through darkness, something terrible pursuing her. The images flickered and shifted, some fading while others brightened. A tapestry of time woven from possibility? A low, cosmic hum filled the air, resonating in Bran's bones. It wasn't quite sound, not in the way he understood it. The hum was deeper than that, more fundamental. It felt like the turning of the world itself, the slow grinding of destiny's wheel. Bran reached toward the gateway showing Father. His hand passed through the shimmering surface, and the hum shifted pitch. The image wavered, Father's face blurring for a moment before resolving again. Bran jerked his hand back, heart hammering. The force flowed through everything here. He could feel it now, really feel it in a way he never had before. It was the current connecting all these moments, threading through the gateways like water through a mill wheel. Each gateway was a possibility, a path, a choice made or unmade. And he stood at the center of it all, a single point where infinite lines converged. The scale of it struck him like a fist to the chest. He was nothing here, a mote of dust before a storm. This wasn't like the dreams the crow had shown him. Those had been like looking at a tapestry, seeing the pattern from a distance. This was being thrown into the weaver's workshop while the looms never stopped their terrible work. The threads were everywhere, crossing and recrossing, knotting and fraying, and Bran could see them all at once. Maybe I shouldn't have listened, he thought. The cold knot of fear in his stomach tightened. The crow had promised power, knowledge, the ability to save his family from the darkness coming from beyond the wall. But standing here, surrounded by infinity, Bran felt only small and lost. A sharp, terrified gasp cut through the cosmic hum. Bran spun. From of the gateways, a figure stumbled through it, arms windmilling for balance, and the gateway snapped shut behind her with a sound like a bell's final chime fading into silence. The girl with silver gold hair stood 10 paces away, staring at her hands as if she'd never seen them before. Her breath came in short, sharp pants. She wore the same travel-stained wool Bran had glimpsed through the gateway, and her violet eyes were wide with panic. What sorcery is this? Her voice trembled, high and frightened. She turned in a slow circle, taking in the infinite gateways, the shimmering mist, the impossible ground beneath her feet. Where am I? Where are my dragons? Bran raised his hands, palms open, the way he'd seen Father calm a spooked horse. It's all right, he said, keeping his voice soft. I'm lost too. My name is Bran. Bran Stark. The girl's head snapped toward him. Stark. Suspicion warred with desperation in her expression. You are Lord Eddard's son? I am. She glanced back at where the gateway had been, but there was only empty air and swirling mist. I was in a Godswood, in White Harbor, and now, she looked around again, and Bran saw her hands shaking. What is this place? I don't know, Bran admitted. I was touching the heart tree of Winterfell, and then I was here. The girl's breathing slowed slightly. She studied him with those strange violet eyes, and Bran felt the weight of her gaze like a physical thing. After a long moment, she seemed to reach some internal decision. My name is Daenerys, she said. Daenerys Targaryen. Bran's eyes widened. Targaryen. The name sent a jolt through him. Maester Luwin had mentioned the name before in one of their lessons about the history of Westeros. The Dragon Lords. The Mad King. Robert's rebellion. He gestured to a nearby gateway, one that still showed father in the White Harbor Godswood. I heard you were in Essos. Why are you in White Harbor? I don't think Westeros is safe for you. Daenerys followed his gesture and gasped. She took a step toward the gateway, reaching out as Bran had done, but stopped herself before touching it. That's where I was. Just now. I was sitting with my dragons and the weirwood. She trailed off, shaking her head. I don't understand. I saw them, Bran said, the words tumbling out in a rush. The dragons lying on your skin, the way they moved. They're worried about you, but they're safe. His heart hammered against his ribs. How did you hatch them? How is that even possible? Daenerys's hand flew to her chest, fingers pressing against the fabric of her dress where the dragons must have been coiled beneath. Her eyes went wide, then narrowed. You saw them? Through the gates. I saw you slouched on the heart tree, but dragons? Bran leaned forward, forgetting his fear in the sudden flood of questions. 3 of them. They hatched in Bravos. Daenerys turned back to him, and some of the fear in her eyes had been replaced by a fierce protectiveness. I need to get back to them. They're still so small, and if something happens, how did you get to Bravos? And why come to Westeros? The questions tumbled out before Bran could stop them. Everyone says King Robert would kill any Targaryen he found. Daenerys's expression hardened. My brother Viserys tried to sell me to a Dothraki warlord. I fled with Ser Jorah Mormont's help. We went to Bravos and then... She paused, studying Bran again. Your father found me there. He protected me from bounty hunters. That's when the eggs hatched. Father protected you? Bran couldn't keep the surprise from his voice. He did. We sailed to White Harbor together. Daenerys's voice softened. He told me about the threat beyond the wall. About the dead walking. About... She hesitated. About Jon Snow. Bran's stomach clenched. Jon. What about Jon? What happened to my brother? I don't know if... Daenerys's voice faltered, her violet eyes darting away from Bran's face. Her fingers twisted together, knuckles going pale. Please. The word scraped out of Bran's throat. His pulse hammered against his ribs. Is Jon in trouble? Tell me. The cosmic loom pulsed around them, threads of light weaving through infinite gateways. Daenerys's silver-gold hair caught the radiance, making her seem almost translucent. He's... She drew a shaking breath. Your father told me Jon is not his bastard. That Jon is really Daemon, son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. My nephew. The silence was deafening as Bran's mind reeled. Jon, a Targaryen? His brother, who'd always been the quiet one. The one who stood apart, carried Dragonlord blood? That's why I had the visions, Daenerys continued. When I touched the dragon eggs, I saw things. Snow. A great wall of ice. Children with ancient eyes. A man with a green blade. She looked at Bran intently. 2 boys training together. One with dark hair and gray eyes. The other with auburn hair and a direwolf at his side. They moved like dancers, like nothing I'd ever seen. Jon and Robb, Bran whispered. You saw them training with Master Luke. Master Luke. Daenerys repeated the name slowly. Your father mentioned him. He said Luke teaches you and your siblings something called the Force. Bran gestured at the cosmic loom around them, at the infinite gateways pulsing with light. This is the Force. All of it. Everything. Daenerys turned in a slow circle again, but this time with wonder replacing the fear. This power. It connects everything? It's the thread that weaves all this together. Bran focused, reaching for the Force the way Master Luke had taught him. She gasped as an unseen, gentle pressure lifted her hands. They rose, palms up, hovering in the air as if held by invisible strings. The sensation was beautiful, terrifying, impossible. "It's what lets me do this," Bran said softly. Daenerys stared at her floating hands, her expression caught between terror and exhilaration. "I can feel it. This is magic." Bran let the force ebb, and Daenerys's hands lowered gently back to her sides. She flexed her fingers, testing them, then looked at him with new respect. "Can you teach me?" Before Bran could answer, the resonant hum warped. The sound twisted, becoming discordant, a scraping noise like metal dragged across stone. The light of the gateways dimmed. Several of them snapped closed with violent finality, their images winking out like candles in a sudden wind. The temperature dropped. Bran's breath misted in front of his face. "What's happening?" Daenerys moved closer to him, her earlier confidence evaporating. A voice slithered from the fabric of the realm itself, dry and rasping as dead leaves blown across frozen ground. Such bright little threads, dangling for the picking. Bran's blood turned to ice. He knew that voice. He'd heard it in his dreams, whispering promises of power and knowledge. The three-eyed crow. More gateways snapped shut. The mist darkened, taking on a sickly gray tinge. From a particularly dark and tangled knot of dying gateways, a figure began to coalesce. It formed slowly, deliberately, as if the realm itself was reluctant to give it shape. An ancient, withered man sat on a throne of petrified wood and forgotten time. His body was woven from gnarled roots that twisted through and around him, binding him to his seat. The roots pulsed with a faint, sickly light, and where they touched the shimmering ground, the surface cracked and darkened. One eye burned like a dying star, red and terrible. The other was a pool of absolute void, darker than any night Bran had ever known. When that void eye turned toward him, Bran felt as if he were falling into an endless abyss. The figure smiled. The expression was a crack in old leather, revealing teeth that were too white, too sharp. "And you two have met." The voice scraped against Bran's ears, making him want to cover them. "The fire to feed the roots. How convenient." The single red eye fixed on Daenerys with terrifying hunger. She took a step back, and Bran moved instinctively between her and the ancient thing on the throne. The void eye shifted to Bran. The smile widened. "You have done well, Brandon Stark, answering my call." King's Landing, the Crownlands. The throne room stank of incense and fear. Tyrion stood near the back of the assembled court, his shortened legs aching from standing too long on the cold stone floor. Around him, lords and ladies in their finest silks pressed together like cattle in a pen, all craning their necks to witness the coronation of Joffrey Baratheon, first of his name. "How quickly we've descended into farce," Tyrion thought, watching the High Septon drone through his benedictions. "For days. 4 days since Robert died, and already we crown his killer's son." Cersei hadn't even waited for father to return. The runners had been dispatched with urgent summons, but Tywin Lannister was still days away from King's Landing. His sister couldn't wait that long. She needed Joffrey crowned, needed the legitimacy that came with the ceremony before anyone could question too closely how Robert had actually died. Before anyone could ask why Ser Meryn Trant had also perished that night. His throat slit in the Queen's chambers. Yet Renly's newest raven has made the accurate deduction that has made the realm aware of how his brother was murdered. How? Tyrion's wine cup was empty. He desperately wanted more, but moving now would draw attention. Better to stand here like a good little Lannister and watch this travesty unfold. The High Septon lifted the crown, that heavy circlet of gold with its points like sword tips. Sunlight streaming through the high windows caught the metal, making it gleam. For a moment, Tyrion thought of all the heads that crown had rested upon. Aegon the Conqueror, Maegor the Cruel, Robert Baratheon, who'd won it with his warhammer. And now Joffrey. The crown settled onto golden curls. The boy's face split into a smile that made Tyrion's stomach turn. There was no humility there, no sense of the weight of kingship. Only triumph. Only cruel delight. All hail his grace, Joffrey of the houses Baratheon and Lannister, first of his name, King of the Undulls and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm. The throne room erupted in cheers. Forced, most of them. Tyrion could hear the hesitation beneath the noise, the uncertainty. These lords and ladies knew something was wrong. They could smell the rot beneath the perfume. Joffrey ascended the steps to the Iron Throne with careful precision, his crimson cloak trailing behind him. When he turned and sat upon that twisted mass of swords, Tyrion felt something cold settle in his chest. Gods help us all. The boy king raised his hand, and the cheering died away like wind before a storm. "My loyal subjects," Joffrey began, his voice carrying through the hall with surprising strength. "I stand before you today not in celebration, but in mourning. My father, King Robert, first of his name, was taken from us by treachery most foul." Tyrion's fingers tightened around his empty cup. Here it came. The lie Cersei had crafted in those frantic hours after Robert's death. The title of the realm's most honorable man has long been given to Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North. Joffrey's voice dripped with contempt. "But honor is a mask that traitors wear when they plot their schemes. Lord Stark sent assassins to murder my father in his own chambers. He sought to steal the throne for himself, to place a northern wolf where a stag should stand." The throne room remained silent. No one cheered. Tyrion scanned the faces around him and saw confusion, doubt. They'd heard the official story, but hearing it from Joffrey's mouth made it no more believable. "I will have justice for my father's murder," Joffrey continued, his voice rising. "I will have Eddard Stark's head on a spike before the moon turns. I will have every Stark who aided him brought to justice. I will show the realm what happens to traitors who dare strike at the king." Now some cheers rose, scattered and uncertain. Tyrion looked toward the Kingsguard standing at attention near the throne. Jaime stood there in his white armor, his face carefully blank, one hand resting on his sword hilt. His father, Tyrion thought bitterly. Joffrey calls Robert his father, and his real father stands not 10 feet away, sworn to protect him, sworn to silence. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so catastrophic. Jaime had killed Robert. Jaime was Joffrey's true father. And now Jaime stood as Kingsguard to his own bastard son, playing the role of loyal protector while the realm tore itself apart on lies. Joffrey wasn't finished. His eyes swept the crowd, bright with malice. "I understand Lord Stark had plans to marry his daughter, the Lady Sansa, to myself." His lips curved into something that might have been a smile on a less cruel face. "It would be a shame to execute her after I take the head of her father and brothers. Though I suppose she's pretty enough that I might find other uses for her first." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. Tyrion felt bile rise in his throat. The girl was what, 12? 13? And Joffrey spoke of her like she was a toy to be played with and broken. "This is what we've unleashed," Tyrion thought. "This is what Cersei has given the realm. A monster with a crown." The laughter died quickly, replaced by uncomfortable silence. Even those who might have found the jest amusing knew better than to laugh too loudly at threats against a great lord's daughter. Joffrey seemed disappointed by the muted response, but he pressed on. "My uncles have also shown their true colors. Renly Baratheon has fled to Highgarden, where he spreads lies and plots rebellion. And Stannis Baratheon, that grim fool who squats on Dragonstone, has dared to contest my rightful claim to the Iron Throne." Joffrey's voice grew shrill. "They are traitors, both of them, power-hungry dogs who would tear the realm apart for their own ambition. I want their heads. I want them brought before me in chains so they can beg for mercy before I have them executed." The crowd shifted uneasily. Declaring war on 2 of Robert's brothers, on men who had their own claims and their own armies, was madness. Even Cersei looked concerned now, though she hid it well behind her serene mask. "But before I can have my uncle's heads," Joffrey said, and something in his tone made Tyrion's blood run cold, "I will need one right here, in this very castle." The throne room went deathly quiet. "Someone has been feeding lies to my dear Uncle Renly from inside King's Landing," Joffrey continued, his voice carrying an edge of theatrical accusation. "Lies about how my father died. Lies about the legitimacy of my claim. Lies designed to undermine the crown and sow discord throughout the realm." Tyrion's heart began to pound. No, he wouldn't. Cersei wouldn't be that stupid. "Bring in the prisoner." The doors at the far end of the hall crashed open. Gold cloaks marched in, dragging a figure between them. The man's legs barely worked, his feet scraping against the stone. His face was swollen and bruised, one eye nearly shut. Blood stained his torn robes. But Tyrion recognized him instantly. Varys, the Spider of King's Landing, the master of whisperers who knew every secret in the realm, hung between his captors like a broken doll. His powdered face was streaked with dirt and blood. His soft hands, always so carefully manicured, were raw and scraped. The gold cloaks threw him down before the Iron Throne. Varys collapsed onto the stone, barely catching himself with his hands. A whimper escaped his lips. Tyrion wanted to move, wanted to shout, wanted to do something. but his legs felt rooted to the floor. Around him, the court watched in horrified silence. "This creature," Joffrey said, gesturing down at Varys with obvious disgust, "has been in my service as Master of Whisperers, a position of great trust. A position he has betrayed by sending word to my treasonous uncle about matters that are none of his concern." Varys raised his head slightly. His one good eye found Tyrion's face in the crowd. The plea there was unmistakable. "Help me." "Varys of the Free Cities," Joffrey intoned, clearly enjoying himself. "You stand accused of treason against the crown, of spreading lies about the death of King Robert, of undermining the rightful succession, of conspiring with enemies of the realm." The boy king leaned forward. "How do you plead?" Varys's mouth opened. Blood trickled from his split lip. He tried to speak, but only a croak emerged. His eye was already swelling shut. Joffrey smiled. That terrible, cruel smile that Tyrion had seen too many times before. The smile that meant someone was about to suffer for the boy's amusement. "I asked you a question, traitor. How do you plead?" Varys tried again. His lips moved, but no sound came out. He was barely conscious, barely able to hold himself upright. Whatever Cersei's men had done to him in the black cells, it had been thorough. Tyrion's feet finally moved. He pushed through the crowd, ignoring the startled looks, ignoring protocol and propriety. He had to do something. He couldn't just stand there and watch this happen. "Your Grace," Tyrion called out, his voice carrying across the throne room. "Forgive my interruption, but how can we be certain of these accusations?" Joffrey's head snapped toward him, eyes narrowing. "Uncle, how kind of you to take an interest. I merely wish to ensure justice is properly served, Your Grace." Tyrion kept his voice level, reasonable. "Lord Varys has served the crown faithfully for many years. Such serious charges require serious evidence. Are you questioning your king?" Joffrey's voice rose dangerously. "I am questioning the certainty of the charges, Your Grace. There is a difference." Cersei rose from her seat beside the throne, her green eyes fixed on Tyrion with a warning that was impossible to miss. "We have a reliable source, brother," she said smoothly. "One who has proven most helpful in uncovering plots against the crown." Tyrion opened his mouth to ask who this source might be, but then he saw it. Just for an instant, Joffrey's eyes flicked to the side, to where Peter Baelish stood among the small council members, his face carefully neutral. Of course, Littlefinger had orchestrated this. Varys knew too much, had too many secrets, couldn't be controlled. So Littlefinger had fed Cersei exactly what she wanted to hear, had given her a traitor to punish, had eliminated a rival in one neat stroke. And Tyrion had been too slow to see it coming. "Now that we've dealt with disruptions from dwarves," Joffrey said, his voice dripping with contempt, "I can proceed with justice. Varys, I find you guilty of treason. The sentence is death." He gestured to the headsman, who stepped forward with his great axe. The blade gleamed in the sunlight. Varys whimpered. The sound cut through Tyrion like a knife. "Wait," Joffrey said suddenly. The headsman paused. Everyone in the throne room froze. Even Cersei looked confused. "Your Grace?" she asked, her voice honey-sweet. "What are you doing?" Joffrey's smile widened. "I want to do it myself." The throne room erupted in whispers. Cersei's face went pale. Even Jaime shifted uncomfortably in his white armor. "I've been practicing with my new toy," Joffrey continued, gesturing eagerly. "Bring it out." Two servants hurried forward carrying an ornate crossbow. The wood was dark and polished, the metal fittings gold. It was a beautiful weapon, clearly expensive, clearly deadly. Tyrion felt something die inside him. This was it. This was the moment when any last hope of salvaging this situation disappeared. The realm would watch their new king murder a man with his own hands, would see the cruelty and madness that sat upon the Iron Throne. And there was nothing Tyrion could do to stop it. "Your Grace," Cersei tried, her voice strained. "Perhaps it would be more fitting if—" "I am the king," Joffrey shrieked. "I will do as I please." He snatched the crossbow from the servants, fumbling with it for a moment before getting it properly seated against his shoulder. The bolt was already loaded. All he had to do was aim and pull the trigger. Varys looked up at him. Blood ran down his face. His lips moved in what might have been a prayer. Joffrey pulled the trigger. The bolt caught Varys in the chest with a meaty thunk. The eunuch gasped, his body jerking backward. He clutched at the shaft protruding from his ribs, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Again!" Joffrey shouted, laughing. Load it again. A servant rushed forward with another bolt. His hands shook as he loaded the crossbow. Joffrey didn't wait for Varys to die. He aimed and fired again. The second bolt took Varys in the stomach. The eunuch screamed, a high, terrible sound that echoed through the throne room. He fell onto his side, curling around the pain. Tyrion couldn't watch. He couldn't look away. Around him, the court stood in horrified silence. No one moved. No one spoke. They just watched their king murder a man for sport. One more, Joffrey crowed. Right between the eyes. The third bolt went through Varys's throat. The scream cut off abruptly, replaced by a wet, gurgling sound. The Master of Whispers twitched once, twice, then went still. Joffrey lowered the crossbow, his face flushed with excitement. Did you see that? Did you see? No one answered. The silence in the throne room was absolute. Cersei recovered first, her face smoothing into a mask of approval. Well done, my son. You have shown the realm that traitors will not be tolerated. Get rid of the body, Joffrey ordered, waving dismissively at Varys's corpse. I don't want to look at it anymore. Gold cloaks hurried forward to drag the body away. Blood smeared across the stone floor, leaving a dark trail toward the doors. Tyrion's hands were shaking. He clasped them behind his back to hide it. His mind felt numb, unable to process what he'd just witnessed. Varys was dead, murdered by a boy king who laughed while he did it. And this was only the beginning. Joffrey handed the crossbow back to his servants and returned to the Iron Throne, settling into it like it was a comfortable chair. His smile never wavered. Now then, he said brightly, where was I? Ah yes, my plans for dealing with my traitorous uncles. He looked out over the court, his gaze settling on Littlefinger. Lord Baelish, you have served my mother well. You have proven yourself loyal and clever. I have a task for you. Littlefinger stepped forward, bowing low. Your grace has only to command. You will go to the Vale. You will convince Lysa Arryn to prepare her forces to march against the Starks. It's time they chose a side. It will be my pleasure, your grace. Littlefinger's voice was smooth as silk. Though I confess, it may take some time to persuade Lady Arryn. She is cautious about committing her forces. Then be persuasive, Joffrey snapped. You're good at that, aren't you? Persuading people. I do my best, your grace. See that you do. I want the Vale's forces ready to march within the month. While you handle that, I will deal with my errant uncles. Renly thinks he can hide in Highgarden. Stannis thinks he's safe on Dragonstone. They will both learn that there is no safety from a king's justice. Tyrion listened to Joffrey's proclamations and felt the realm fracturing around him. The North would never submit after this. Renly had already crowned himself. Stannis would do the same soon enough. The Vale would be dragged into the conflict. The Riverlands would follow wherever the Starks led. War. Not just war, but a war that would tear the Seven Kingdoms apart completely. A war that would leave thousands dead and the realm in ruins. And at the center of it all sat a boy king who thought it was all a game. A boy who murdered with a smile and demanded heads like they were toys. Father needs to return, Tyrion thought desperately. He needs to take control before Joffrey destroys everything. The coronation continued. Joffrey made more proclamations, more threats, more promises of vengeance. The court listened in silence, their faces carefully blank. No one dared object. No one dared question. They had all seen what happened to those who displeased the king. Tyrion stood there, his legs aching, his head pounding, and watched the realm descend into chaos. He thought of Varys's last look, that silent plea for help. He thought of Gendry, hopefully safe in Storm's End by now. He thought of all the pieces moving across the board, all the plots and counterplots, all the schemes that had led to this moment. And he realized, with a clarity that felt like ice water in his veins, that they had lost control. The game was no longer theirs to play. Joffrey had taken the board and smashed it, scattering the pieces. Now there was only war, only chaos, only the terrible certainty that everything was going to get much, much worse. Gods help us all, Tyrion thought again. Because no one else can. Chapter 40, Two Kinds of Sight. Year 299 AC/8 ABY. Oh? Bran's voice came out smaller than he'd intended. A child's whisper swallowed by the vastness of roots and shadow. Who are you? The figure rose from his throne with a grace that belied his ancient frame. He swept into a bow that was somehow theatrical, a performance crafted for an audience of two. When he spoke, His voice was a harmony of rustling leaves, a sound that belonged to no living man. I am Bryn Den Rivers. Daenerys gasped. She stepped forward, her earlier wariness forgotten in a rush of recognition. Rivers, she breathed. A great bastard of Aegon the Unworthy. Her mind was racing. Bran could feel it through the Force, her thoughts a tumble of lineages and histories. But you would be more than a century old. How is this possible? A smile ghosted across the withered face. The blood of the dragon runs deep, little one. And there are magics in this world older than our house, older than the conquest, older than the long night itself. Bran barely heard him. He was staring at that red eye, at the void where the other should be, and feeling the cold, avaricious hunger that radiated from the ancient figure like winter's chill. The three-eyed crow who had haunted his dreams, who had shown him visions of horror and promised power if only Bran would come north, would surrender himself to instruction. The crow who had shown him Sansa screaming in chains. You're the crow, Bran said. Not a question, an accusation. His voice came out harder than he intended, edged with the bluntness that father said was the Stark way. Where are we? Why did you bring us here? Daenerys turned to look at him, confusion breaking through her awe. You know him? Bryn Den Rivers tilted his head, studying Bran with that single red eye. The void socket seemed to pulse with its own dark light. When he smiled, it was the smile of a predator who had found particularly interesting prey. Patience, Bloodraven said, ignoring Daenerys' question entirely. His gaze remained fixed on Bran. You lack patience, child. Answer my question, Bran demanded, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Where are we? Bloodraven's smile widened, showing teeth too white, too perfect for such an ancient face. He gestured to the realm around them with one skeletal hand. This place has many names. The realm between, the great Weirwood. The maesters in their citadel have no knowledge of it, for it predates their chains and their candles and their careful cataloging of the world. His voice took on the cadence of a teacher, patient and instructive. It is the source from which magic drinks. The heart trees you worship in your godswood are but roots reaching into your world, drawing sustenance from this place. And you, boy, are not yet attuned to its true nature. Bran pushed back against the explanation, against the attempt to cast Bloodraven as teacher rather than threat. He remembered Master Luke's lessons about trusting his feelings, about how the Force could guide him if he let it. And right now, the Force was screaming danger. The gates, Bran said, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his gut, showed me a strange silver bird flying through the dark. What was it? For a moment, something flickered in that red eye. Surprise, perhaps, or calculation. Then Bloodraven's smile returned, dry and cracking like ancient leather. The universe is vaster than your maesters conceive, boy. Our world is but a grain of sand on the shores of Sithorios. There are other birds, other stars, other realms where men have never walked. He turned his gaze to Daenerys, and Bran felt her shiver under that attention. And I have shown you both what is to come. The long night returns. The cold god wakes. The dead will walk, and the living will fall before them like wheat before the scythe. You are not ready. Daenerys stepped forward, her earlier confusion giving way to the fear Bran had felt since arriving in this place. Then teach us, she said. Show us how to become ready. My dragons are newly hatched, and if you can help us prepare for what's coming, then I beg you. No. Bran's hand shot out, catching Daenerys' arm. She turned to him, startled, but he kept his eyes locked on Bloodraven. The hunger in the Force had intensified, a killing frost that made his skin prickle with warning. He didn't bring us here to teach us, Bran said. His voice was cold, certain. He brought us here to feed. The realm fell silent. Even the thrumming network of connections seemed to still, as if the entire space was holding its breath. Then Bloodraven laughed. It was a terrible sound, dry and rasping, like wind through dead leaves. The desiccated flesh around his eyes crinkled with genuine amusement. Clever boy, he rasped. Clever, clever boy. That starborn pest has taught you to feel the truth of things. An inconvenience, but no matter. You understand enough to make this interesting. His tone shifted, losing the patient teacher's cadence and taking on something older, something weary and vast. To understand why you are here is to understand why I went beyond the wall seeking power. For love. For a world I wish to save. A flicker of genuine pain crossed his withered features. Sharera. My Sharera Seastar. I would have burned the world for her, would have torn down the wall itself if she had asked. But she disappeared, and I remained, and I found that the world still needed saving. He gestured to the darkness beyond the gateways, to the void that pressed against the edges of this silver realm. The cold gods do not die, children. They do not tire. They do not forgive. I found them beyond the wall, found their ancient hatred and their endless hunger. To fight them, I needed time. The children of the forest gave me what they could, bound me to the weirwoods, extended my life beyond its natural span. The hunger in the force became a palpable thing, a killing frost that made Bran's breath mist in the air. But it was not enough, so I took the rest. I took what I needed from those who gave me wisdom. I have endured for more than a century, children. I have watched kingdoms rise and fall. I have seen the dragons die and return. And through it all, I have prepared for the moment when the Night King would wake. His red eye blazed brighter, fixing on Bran with terrible intensity. Now that moment approaches, and I need more. You boy, your potential is a feast. Magic flows through you like a river, untapped and wild. With your power added to mine, I could strike such a blow against the cold gods that they would never rise again. He turned to Daenerys, and she took an involuntary step backward. And you, little dragon, you have served your purpose admirably. You brought the fire back into the world, hatched the dragons that were meant to remain stone forever. Now your life will fuel the final blow. A worthy end for a Targaryen, don't you think? To die saving the world your ancestors conquered. Horror dawned on Daenerys' face. She looked at Bran, then back at Bloodraven, understanding finally breaking through her awe at meeting a piece of her family's history. You're going to kill us, she whispered. I am going to save you, Bloodraven corrected. There is a difference. Your deaths will have meaning, purpose. You will be the weapons that end the long night before it can truly begin. Daenerys' hand found Bran's. Her fingers were trembling, but her grip was strong. Run, she hissed. They turned as one, but the silver ground beneath their feet had changed. It was tar now, thick and clinging, holding them fast. Bran tried to lift his foot and couldn't. Tried to pull away and found himself trapped as surely as if he'd been chained. No, not like this. Not after everything Master Luke had taught him, all the hours practicing in the Godswood, all the meditation and training and learning to feel the force flowing through him. He wouldn't die here, wouldn't let this ancient thing consume him like kindling for some fire. Bran roared, not with his voice, but with the force itself. He pushed outward with everything he had, every scrap of power he could muster. For a heartbeat, it worked. The ground beneath them cracked, spiderwebs of light racing through the tar. Daenerys stumbled a step forward, her foot coming free. He'd created a shield, a barrier between them and Bloodraven's will. Impressive, Bloodraven said. The shield shattered. Bran felt it break like glass, felt the crushing weight that descended in its wake. His knees buckled. Beside him, Daenerys gasped, her breath stolen by the pressure that bore down on them both. Then the draining began. Faint red mist started to bleed from Bran's skin, like a mist that flowed like water toward the Weirwood throne. He could see the same happening to Daenerys, her violet eyes wide with terror as the very essence of her was pulled away. Bran's vision tunneled. The gateways around them blurred, the connections he'd felt so vividly growing distant and muted. He tried to push back again, tried to summon the force, but it was like grasping at smoke. The power slipped through his fingers, drawn inexorably toward Bloodraven. So much potential, the ancient green seer murmured, his voice layered with a salivating hunger that made Bran's stomach turn. So much power, wasted on sentiment and childish dreams. That man cannot save you now. He is far away, occupied with his own concerns. He has ruined my plans for the last time. Bran's legs gave out. He collapsed onto the tar-like ground, Daenerys falling beside him. The mist continued to flow from them, growing thicker, more substantial. Bran could feel himself fading, feel the life being drawn out of him like blood from a wound. This was how he would die. Not in battle as a knight, not protecting his family, but drained like a wineskin in some cosmic realm he didn't understand. The thought filled him with a rage that had nowhere to go, no outlet, no purpose. Then the draining stopped. Completely. Bran gasped, air rushing back into his lungs. Beside him, Daenerys did the same, her chest heaving with desperate breaths. A new voice filled the void. It was calm, measured, carrying a weight that made even Bloodraven's ancient tones seem thin by comparison. A fascinating story. Pity my son is preoccupied. But I am not. A man faded into existence from the mist. He wore simple robes, dark and unadorned, and his face was weathered in a way that spoke of hard years and harder choices. But it was his eyes that caught Bran's attention. Bran felt an impossible familiarity looking at those eyes. He'd seen their shape before, their color, in Master Luke's face when his teacher was lost in thought about his past. Bloodraven was wrenched into the air. His weirwood roots splintered with sounds like breaking bones, and his withered body hung suspended by an invisible hand. The red eye blazed with fury and, for the first time, fear. "Who are you?" he choked out. The man in dark robes offered a small, sad smile. It didn't reach his eyes. "I've had many names. Lord of the Sith, the Emperor's Fist, Darth Vader." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a finality that made the air itself seem to still. "But the only one you need to worry about is the last one." A soundless crunch resonated through the Force. Bran felt it in his chest, a fundamental unmaking that defied description. Bloodraven's form imploded, collapsing in on itself like a star dying in reverse. His red eye flared once, bright and desperate, and then he was simply gone. Motes of dust and fading silver mist, dispersing into the void. The weirwood throne crumbled. The petrified roots turned to ash. In the space of 3 heartbeats, more than a century of existence was erased as if it had never been. Bran scrambled to his feet, pulling a trembling Daenerys up with him. Gratitude warred with a deep, instinctual wariness. This man had saved them, yes, but the power he displayed was terrifying. Absolute. The kind of power that could unmake a person with a thought. "Thank you," Bran managed. His voice came out small, childish. He hated it, but he couldn't seem to make himself sound braver. "But who are you? Truly?" The man's sad expression softened. For a moment, something paternal flickered in those eyes, a warmth that reminded Bran achingly of father. "I am a ghost boy, a memory, but you can call me Anakin." He glanced between them, and Bran felt the weight of that gaze assessing them, measuring them. "And I am your teacher's father." Bran's eyes went wide, the fear of moments ago forgotten in a rush of childlike astonishment. "Master Luke's father. That's why you looked." He trailed off, suddenly uncertain. Master Luke had never spoken of his father, had deflected the few times Bran had asked. There had been pain in that deflection, old wounds that hadn't fully healed. Anakin gave a faint smirk, charming and roguish in a way that didn't quite match the terrible power he'd just displayed. "Yes, well, my son and I have a complicated history." His expression shifted, becoming thoughtful, almost calculating. "Now, what to do with the two of you?" The warmth drained from his voice on those last words, replaced by something cooler, more analytical. Bran felt Daenerys tense beside him, felt his own wariness returning in a rush. They'd been saved from one ancient power only to find themselves at the mercy of another. Before that thought could fully form into fear, a third voice cut through the mist. It was older than Anakin's, drier, laced with a weary exasperation that somehow managed to sound fond. Now, Anakin. Let's not be hasty." An older man stepped into view, his robes the color of sand and sun-bleached bone. His beard was neatly trimmed, his hair going gray at the temples. He moved with a patience that seemed infinite, his hand resting near his belt in a gesture that was somehow both casual and ready. Daenerys found her voice. "And who are you?" "My name is Obi-Wan Kenobi." He gave them a kind, tired smile that reached his eyes in a way Anakin's hadn't. "And I believe we have much to discuss." Bran looked between the two men, trying to understand his situation. "Where is Master Luke?" Bran asked. "Can you bring him here?" Obi-Wan's smile turned regretful. "I'm afraid not, young one. We are bound to this realm in ways your teacher is not. We can observe, can sometimes intervene when the need is great, but we cannot leave easily. Your Master Luke walks the living world still." "Then how are we here?" Daenerys demanded. Her fear was giving way to something sharper, more focused. "How can ghosts intervene in anything?" "The Force," Anakin said simply. "It binds all things, connects all things. Life and death, past and present, your world and the countless others that spin through the void. We are echoes in that great pattern, sustained by the Force itself." He moved closer, and Bran resisted the urge to step back. Up close, Anakin's presence was overwhelming. The force around him was a maelstrom barely contained, power that made even dwarfed Master Luke's abilities. The creature who tried to consume you was old, Anakin continued. Old and hungry and convinced that his cause justified any atrocity. I've known men like that. I was a man like that once. His expression darkened. He would have drained you both, used your potential to fuel his war against the darkness he claimed to fight. And in doing so, he would have become the very thing he sought to destroy. The dark side, Bran said quietly. Master Luke had spoken of it in their lessons, warned of the seductive nature of power gained through fear and anger and hate. Anakin's eyes sharpened. Yes, your teacher has instructed you well, it seems. The dark side is a path to abilities many would consider unnatural, and once you start down that road, it is difficult to turn back. He paused, and something ancient and painful flickered across his features. I know this better than most. Obi-Wan moved to stand beside Anakin, his presence a counterweight to the younger man's intensity. What my former apprentice means to say is that you have been given a great gift, children. The Force flows through you both very potently in you, young Brandon. But such gifts come with responsibility. I understand that, Daenerys said. Her voice was steady now, the trembling gone. Lord Stark has been teaching me about duty, about the weight of power. We understand what's at stake. Do you? Anakin asked. Do you truly understand what's coming? He gestured, and the gateways around them blazed to life. Through them, Bran saw visions that made his breath catch. The wall, crumbling under an assault of ice and shadow. Winterfell frozen, its towers reduced to rubble. His father, his mother, his brothers and sisters, all of them fallen before an army of the dead. The creature called the Night King is not simply a threat to your north, Anakin said. He is a wound in the Force itself, a corruption that spreads like rot through wood. If he is not stopped, if he is allowed to consume your world, that corruption will spread beyond your realm. It will reach into the space between, into the very fabric of reality. Bran's legs felt weak. But we're just children. How are we supposed to stop something like that? You're not, Obi-Wan said gently. Not alone, at least. But you are pieces of a larger whole, part of a pattern that is only now becoming clear. Your teacher was drawn to your world for a reason. Your brother Jon, or demon I suppose, carries a heritage that bridges ice and fire. He moved closer, kneeling so that he was at eye level with Bran. The Force has brought you all together, child. You and your siblings, the Dragon Princess, your teacher from the stars. Each of you has a role to play in what's to come. The question is whether you will be ready when the moment arrives. How do we become ready? Bran asked. Bloodraven said we weren't prepared, and he was right. I can barely lift a few stones with the Force, and Daenerys only just hatched her dragons. We're not strong enough. Anakin knelt beside Obi-Wan, his expression serious. Strength is not merely a matter of power, boy. I was one of the most powerful Force users in the galaxy, and that strength led me to commit atrocities that haunt me still. True strength comes from understanding, from wisdom, from the connections you forge with others. Your teacher will continue your training, Obi-Wan added, and we will watch, will guide when we can. But you must trust in the Force, must trust in each other. The path ahead will be difficult, will demand sacrifices you cannot yet imagine. But if you walk it together, if you remember what you're fighting for, then there is hope. Bran looked at Daenerys. She met his gaze, and in her violet eyes he saw the same determination he felt building in his own chest. They'd come within moments of death, had been saved by powers they didn't fully understand. But they were still here, still alive, still able to fight. Please, Bran said, his voice cracking. Teach us. You could help us prepare. Anakin's expression softened, but pain flickered across his translucent features. I wish I could, boy, truly, but I cannot. Why not? Daenerys stepped forward, her hands clenched at her sides. You've already helped us once. You saved our lives. We intervened because the Force willed it, Obi-Wan said gently. But we are echoes, memories bound to the cosmic force. We cannot take you as students, cannot guide you as your teacher does. Bran felt something cold settle in his chest. The silver ground beneath his feet seemed to pulse with a warning rhythm he hadn't noticed before. There's another reason, isn't there? Obi-Wan exchanged a glance with Anakin. You are quite perceptive. Yes, this realm is not meant for the living. Already, your connection to your bodies grows strained. Can you feel it? Now that he mentioned it, Bran could. a faint tugging sensation like a thread pulled taut. The longer he stood here, the more distant his physical form felt, as if it were drifting away on some invisible current. "What do we do now?" Daenerys asked. "Now?" Anakin said, rising to his feet. "You wake up, return to your bodies, to your world. Prepare yourselves and those you love for the war that's coming." "Will we see you again?" Bran asked. Obi-Wan smiled. "Perhaps. The Force works in mysterious ways, young one. We are always with you in a sense. Every time you reach for the Force, every time you trust in its guidance, you touch the echoes of all who have walked this path before." The realm around them began to fade. The gateways dimmed, the silver ground growing translucent. Bran felt a pulling sensation, like a rope tied around his chest, drawing him back toward his body. Bran turned to Daenerys, the silver ground beneath them already beginning to thin like morning mist. "I'd like to meet you," he said. "In person, I mean, when all this is over." She looked at him, and even here in this strange realm between worlds, her smile carried warmth. "I'll make it happen," she said softly. Then her expression shifted, one pale eyebrow arching. "Though perhaps next time don't go following terrifying old men into mystical visions first." Heat crept up Bran's neck. He managed a guilty smile, caught between sheepishness and the fading wonder of what they'd just witnessed. "I'll try," he said, though they both knew he probably wouldn't. The realm dissolved around them and the last threads of connection snapped, and Bran felt himself pulled violently backward. "Remember," Anakin called out, his voice growing distant, "the dark side offers power, but it demands everything in return. Stay true to the light, no matter how tempting the shadows become. And trust in your teacher," Obi-Wan added. "Luke has walked through darkness and emerged into light. He knows the dangers you'll face, knows the temptations that will come. Listen to him." The last thing Bran saw before the realm vanished entirely was the two ghosts standing side by side, watching with expressions that mingled hope and sorrow in equal measure. Then he was falling, tumbling through darkness, rushing back toward the waking world. Bran's eyes snapped open. He was in his bed at Winterfell, the familiar stone ceiling above him, the sound of wind rattling the shutters. For a moment he lay still, his heart pounding, wondering if it had all been a dream. He turned his head, the motion sluggish, and found his mother slumped in a chair beside his bed. Her auburn hair hung loose and tangled, her face drawn with exhaustion. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her hands lay limp in her lap, fingers still curled as if she'd been clutching something. "Mother," Bran whispered. Catelyn's eyes flew open. She surged from the chair, the wood scraping against stone, and was at his side in an instant. Her hands framed his face, trembling as they touched his cheeks, his forehead, as if to confirm he was real. "Bran. Oh, Bran." Her voice cracked. She pressed her lips to his brow, then pulled back to look at him, searching his face with desperate intensity. "How do you feel? Does anything hurt? Should I fetch Maester Luwin?" "I'm fine, Mother. You've been asleep for days." Her fingers moved through his hair, gentle but insistent. "You wouldn't wake. We tried everything." She broke off, swallowing hard. Bran caught her wrist. The touch grounded him, reminded him this was real. The stone walls, the smell of herbs from the brazier, the way his mother's pulse hammered beneath his palm. "A lot has happened," he said quietly. Catelyn's expression shifted. The relief gave way to something harder, sharper. She straightened, though her hand remained on his shoulder. "Tell me everything." It wasn't a request. Highgarden, the Reach. The tent smelled of oiled leather and steel, a scent that reminded Jon of Winterfell's practice yard. It was a small comfort amid the overwhelming strangeness of Highgarden. Outside, trumpets blared and crowds roared, but here the air was thick with northern pragmatism. By the gods, these Southron smiths care more for leaf patterns than a man's life. Jory's voice carried the particular frustration of a practical man confronted with impractical beauty. He wrestled with a pauldron, trying to fasten the intricate leather straps to Master Luke's shoulder. "How are you supposed to move in this?" Jon watched as his teacher stood patient but uncomfortable, like a man forced into clothes 2 sizes too small. The Tyrell plate was magnificent, all scrollwork and polished steel that caught the morning light streaming through the tent's opening. It was also completely wrong for Master Luke. "It's restrictive," Luke admitted, rotating his arms stiffly. The motion looked wooden, nothing like the fluid grace Jon had seen him display when fighting. John stepped forward to help Jory with the other pauldron. His fingers worked the buckles with practiced ease, though these southern straps were more complex than northern ones. Best get used to it. Seems this is how they fight their tourneys. Luke's smile was wry, touched with something that might have been amusement or resignation. A tourney seems like an inefficient way to settle a dispute. You should be out there, John. Show them what real swordsmanship looks like. John shook his head, echoing the lessons Luke had drilled into him over months of training. You taught me skill is for battle, not for show. I'll have no need to joust with a man when the dead come walking. The words fell heavy in the tent. Outside, people laughed and cheered, celebrating games and glory. Inside, 3 men prepared for war that hadn't yet arrived. Jory finally managed to buckle the last piece of armor into place. He clapped Luke on the back, the sound ringing against the plate. There. You look almost like a proper knight. Just try not to trip over some southern fool out there. He turned to John, his weathered face serious beneath the jest. Speaking of which, you've a different kind of melee to fight. Up in the stands. Don't let the smiling roses prick you. John felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd faced wildlings in the Wolfswood, fought ironborn raiders on the open sea, but the thought of navigating a southern court filled him with a different kind of dread. I'll be careful, he said. Jory snorted. Careful doesn't win you anything in places like this. Just remember who you are and what you're about. The rest is noise. They left Luke to finish his preparations and emerged from the tent into brilliant sunlight. John blinked against the glare, momentarily overwhelmed by the assault on his senses. Colors blazed everywhere. Banners of green and gold, ladies in silk gowns of rose and cream, knights in armor polished to mirror brightness. Perfume hung thick in the air, mingling with the scent of roasted meat and sweet wine. Laughter rippled through the crowds like water over stones. It was nothing like the north, nothing like home. John followed Jory toward the spectator stands, and the stands rose in tiers before them. At the highest point sat King Renly's platform, draped in cloth of gold and green silk. Lower down but still elevated was the section reserved for nobles and highborn guests. Below that, the common folk stood in a pressing mass. John's eyes found his friends in the crowd below. Sam's round, earnest face was easy to spot beside Marwyn's bulk. Sarella stood nearby, her sharp eyes taking in everything with the focused intensity of a hawk. Thalia looked vibrant and alive in a way John hadn't seen at Oakenshield or even Old Town, her face flushed with excitement. The distance between them felt like 100 miles. A steward in Tyrell livery approached, gesturing toward a seat near the royal platform. John hesitated. The invitation was clear, the expectation obvious. He was meant to sit among the highborn, to accept the status they offered him. He thought of his father. Not Ned Stark, though that man had raised him and loved him, but Rhaegar Targaryen, the prince who'd started a war. What would that man have done? John didn't know. He barely knew who Rhaegar had been, only fragments gleaned from history books. He knew who Jon Snow was, though, and Jon Snow didn't belong on a platform draped in silk. John moved past the steward's gesture and chose a spot at the farthest edge of the noble section. It fulfilled the invitation without embracing what it offered. He preferred the cold edge of the stone bench to the warmth of a court that wasn't his. Jory settled beside him with a grunt. "Stubborn as your father," he muttered. John didn't answer. He was too busy fighting the prickling sensation crawling up his spine. Someone was watching him. He closed his eyes for a heartbeat, reaching out with the force as Luke had taught him. Not to manipulate or move, just to feel, to sense. There. Lady Olenna Tyrell sat 3 rows higher and to the left, her small frame almost lost among the younger nobles surrounding her. But her attention was a sharp thing, precise and cutting. She wasn't just looking at him. She was dissecting him. John let his awareness expand carefully, the way he might test thin ice before crossing. He didn't try to read her thoughts. Luke had warned him that was dangerous, an invasion that could be felt. But he could sense the shape of her thinking, the texture of her mind as it worked. He felt concepts connecting like links in a maester's chain. A blue winter rose, vivid and impossible. A silver-stringed harp, the kind singers used for sad songs. His own face seen through her eyes. Then a name, sharp and clear as a blade. Lyanna. The shock of it nearly broke his concentration. John's eyes snapped open, his heart hammering against his ribs. He forced himself to breathe slowly, to keep his face calm. She knew, or she suspected. Lady Olenna was putting pieces together, connecting the impossible dots that led from a bastard boy to a dead prince's son. Jon stared at the empty tourney field and tried to think. How much did she know? What would she do with the knowledge? Was he in danger here, surrounded by Tyrell guards and southern knights who owed him nothing? A rustle of silk drew his attention. A scent of roses, sweet and cloying. The king seems to be missing his most interesting guest. The voice was warm and melodic, pitched perfectly to carry just to his ears. Jon didn't turn. He kept his eyes on the field, watching servants prepare the lists. Shouldn't the queen be beside him? She laughed softly. The sound was practiced, musical, the kind of laugh that belonged in songs. The king is well attended, and the view is so much better from down here. Margaery Tyrell leaned against the rail beside him. Her proximity was deliberate, Jon realized. Public statement. Everyone in the stands could see the new queen speaking privately with Eddard Stark's bastard. Through the force, he felt the complexity of her emotions. Interest, certainly. Curiosity. Calculation. But beneath it all, something genuine he couldn't quite name. Your guard looks seasoned, she said, her eyes on the field where Luke was emerging in his borrowed armor. How long do you expect him to last against my brother Garland? He is one of the finest swordsmen in the Reach. It was a test. Jon recognized it the way he'd learned to recognize an opponent's feint in the practice yard. She was measuring his pride, his judgment, his loyalty. That's a question for your brother, my lady, not for me. The blunt confidence in his own voice surprised him. It was pure north, the kind of answer Ned Stark might have given. Margaery's smile widened. Such certainty. I find that refreshing. Her gaze swept the field, then returned to him. And are you ready for the joust? My other brother, Loras, he lives for the lists. He has his reputation to defend. I have my honor. We will see which is the heavier burden. She studied him for a long moment. Jon forced himself to meet her eyes. They were brown and warm, touched with gold in the sunlight. Pretty eyes. Dangerous eyes. I notice you wear no lady's favor, she said. Not even from the pretty companions you arrived with. Is that a northern tradition? Jon turned to look at her fully, genuinely confused. I'm here to fight, my lady, not to court. I didn't think I needed one. Her smile was a masterpiece of gentle correction, the kind a Septa might give a child who'd used the wrong fork. Oh, it's not a need, Lord Snow. Simply, good fortune. Her eyes twinkled with something that might have been amusement. Though I suspect you'll have your pick of favors before the day is out. She nodded subtly toward a group of young women in Tyrell colors. They were staring at him with poorly concealed interest, whispering behind their hands and giggling. Heat crept up Jon's neck. He looked away from the giggling ladies, then back at Margaery, feeling completely out of his depth. In the practice yard, he knew what to do. With a sword in his hand, the world made sense. But this game of words and glances and hidden meanings? He had no training for this. Before he could form a response, a herald's trumpet blared across the field. The crowd's noise swelled. Well, Margaery said, her timing perfect. It seems the games are about to begin. She gave him one last look, lingering and deliberate. Through the force, Jon felt the weight of her attention like a physical thing. Good fortune, Jon Snow. She turned and glided back toward the royal box, her silk gown whispering against the stone. Jon watched her go, his mind racing. Jory leaned close. That one's more dangerous than any lance you'll face tomorrow. Jon nodded slowly. He'd felt it through the force, the careful layers of her thoughts, the deliberate nature of every word and gesture. Margaery Tyrell was playing a game he barely understood. On the field below, knights began to gather. Luke stood among them, looking uncomfortable in his borrowed plate. Jon saw Master Marwyn, Thalia and Sam in the crowd, craning their necks to see. Sarella had somehow acquired a better vantage point. The herald's voice rang out, announcing the first melee, but he couldn't shake the feeling of Margaery's eyes on him, or the sharp precision of Lady Olenna's thoughts, or the weight of secrets that pressed down on him like armor he couldn't remove. Jory had been right. This was a different kind of melee entirely, and Jon had no idea if he was winning or losing. Extra. Bran scrambled to his feet, pulling a trembling Daenerys up with him. Gratitude warred with a deep, instinctual wariness. This man had saved them, yes, but the power he displayed was terrifying. Absolute. The kind of power that could unmake a person with a thought. Thank you, Bran managed. His voice came out small, childish. He hated it, but he couldn't seem to make himself sound braver. "But who are you, truly?" The man in dark robes offered a small, sad smile. It didn't reach his eyes. "I've had many names. Lord of the Sith, the Emperor's Fist, Darth Vader." He paused, and something that might have been nostalgia or perhaps regret flickered across his weathered features. "The Youngling Slayer." Bran blinked. "What? Anakin, no.